Let's get this underway. Let's jump into the... Okay, in the server again.
The Iraq war and Afghan war was $2 trillion. Donald Trump amount increase to the debt. I think Donald Trump is responsible for like $8 to $10 trillion of the debt. How much did President Trump add to the debt? Yeah, in his first term, he added $7.8 trillion to the debt. Almost like a quarter of the national debt is Trump. Now, you can argue that COVID was like such a unique moment that it was necessary, but still, that's an absurd amount of cash. How much did Bush add to the debt?
Hey Connor, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. Yeah, President George W. Bush added $6 trillion to the debt. Donald Trump.
Okay, so I get, yeah, he's so Connor's on the stream at the same time.
And snap. Am I still in the server? What
You jumped in and jumped out again. So
I dragged you to the other channel.
okay,
you guys
cool,
were
cool.
talking in the other one.
Got you.
My bad.
Okay, let me go ahead and move my stream over here and pop you guys out,
and
just make sure my chat can hear you. Add to stage. Okay, and you guys can hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, you're very clear, yeah.
Okay, and then, all right, cool. Then I am live. I'm just letting you guys know. And so, yeah, I'm ready whenever you guys are.
Yeah. Kafka said right before we joined, we were doing our unban appeals pre-show. Right beforehand, he's taking a couple minutes before we get started, and I am figuring out the overlay. I see you're both cammed up. Great.
Oh, cool. You can see my camera. Cool, yeah.
Cool. Yes, absolutely. Get that on screen for everybody. And we can do it that way.
And have you had much time, Connor, to do any painting recently?
I haven't. There's a guard platoon that's been sitting to my right. There's a company, third-party bits manufacturer called Reptilian Overlords.
Okay, cool.
They make an excellent Catachan or Catachan third-party miniatures. They're amazing. They're beautiful sculpts. But I just haven't had time. Well, I do have time to paint them, but there's just other projects that are sucking up my time right now.
Yeah, I feel you. Are you more of a painter? Do you play the game as well, right?
I have. So I played probably maybe a dozen games, maybe 24 games in my life.
Okay.
Which is a shame to say because I spent like 3 years building a 2,000-point army, meticulously painting each model in high detail, probably spending an average of 3 hours on each model.
Yeah.
And realistically, I've played maybe a dozen to 24 games. And that's one of the things that I realized. It's like, I want to paint, but 3 hours on each model in order to play a game once every 3 months, once every 6 months, that's a shitload of time.
Yeah.
So yeah, the pay to play ratio for Warhammer is just crazy.
Yeah, you have to enjoy the painting enough, otherwise it's just not worthwhile. I mean, I'm almost identical of a position, except I always played fantasy in Age of Sigmar. But I mean,
I noticed that the fantasy boys, they really do love fantasy a lot. And then I also noticed that the other thing you can do is you can just be rich. You can be rich, and then you can pay other people to paint your armies, and then at that point you can have fun. Or you can just be like a player. Like, so for instance, there's this guy that I bought. I have a Chinese Fire Raptor. So for those of you who don't know, the Fire Raptor is the air support for the Marines. It's done by Forge World. It's beautiful. So I bought a Chinese sculpted Fire Raptor for $50 off of a Facebook group. That guy's, all of his armies are gray. He's never painted anything.
Oh,
he bought proxies and he bought models. He left them gray, and he just plays the tabletop.
I know a lot of people that do this. I mean, in some places, it's actually they don't allow you to pay with, or you allowed to like 20% of your models in like unpainted plastic. But and if you're given the choice, would you only paint or only play? It sounds like you're more of a painter than a player. Then
I think statistically, I've spent infinitely more time painting than playing. It's true. I do enjoy playing as well. But what's happened with me is since I have a family, I got 2 young kids. So like having 3 to 8 hours to play a 2,000 point game is pretty rare. And then what happens is it's so rare that I want to play the entire time. And so what's supposed to be like a 3 or 4 hour 2,000 point game, somebody walks in to the gaming store and they don't have a partner. And I'm so like, oh, let's create a narrative where this army comes in or whatever, and let me respawn my guys. That way we can have the points match up. And so like we do shit like that. But then what's supposed to be a 3 or 4 hour game turns into like a 10-hour slugfest. And I just don't have time like that.
Yeah, it's exactly.
What armies are you running?
Myself or Connor?
No, I was asking Connor, but you can say I didn't know you were running an army right now.
Not right now. I mean, I can't even remember the names of them anymore. I mean, I just call them the undead. Like, I had a skeleton horde that I was painting up, and before that, I used to play high elves when it was still fantasy. And then what else did I make that into? Like, you can make that into a form of elves in Age of Sigmar, and then I rebased everything to round bases, and then got completely tilted when they decided to go back to square bases for fantasy. And that actually put me off. It's like I spent so long rebasing the models, and bases are so important for a good model. So I spent a lot of time on this, and then they said, "Hey, you know what? You can use square bases again." It's like all that time spent on the bases. So
that's how I feel about Terminators. So back in the day, it seemed like the Primaris line was coming out, and a lot of the Firstborn stuff was just getting kind of shipped out. And Gravis came out, and Gravis sucked. Like I just compared to Terminator armor, it just sucks. And so what I did was somebody came up with a beautiful tutorial on how to effectively cut the Gravis models in half, put the Terminator back on it, and then the scaling works where you can make Primaris scale Terminators. And so I probably spent like 2 months like kit bashing Terminators and painting them. And I have I'm very proud of the models. The models are beautiful. But then they just came out with true scale Terminators, and I'm like, mother.
Exactly, yeah.
I probably spent a quarter, like all the recreational time of a financial quarter, kit bashing and painting Terminator models. And then they just like a year later or a year and a half later, they come out with Primaris scale Terminators. Fucking
yeah, it's a lot. It's also like the rule changes that they implement, and so suddenly like models you spend hours working on, that the pride of your army, that your lore kind of is based around, just suddenly is lost, and it becomes an irrelevant model. And if you're lucky, they make a compendium rule set for you, but it's not really official rules anymore, and you feel like those models have no power anymore because they don't have the power of the numbers behind them to play them.
Yeah, that's why I always do rule of cool. Like guys, if we don't start talking about the debate, then we're just gonna talk about Warhammer.
Yeah, that's true.
I do. Okay. But also, you guys are getting too friendly with each other.
No, that's important. I have to say this first. Okay. So number one, I always do
sports guys.
I always do rule of cool. So basically, I just bring whatever's cool, even if it sucks rules wise. And then number two, there was this game where with my rule of cool, I built like an A10 Warthog model. I'll show it to you sometime. But it blasts, like I fly it across the board and I wipe out a squad of Imperial Guardsmen except for a Melta. And then my 200 point model gets blasted off of the board immediately by tanks. And so I'm like, fuck, like I just killed 9 guardsmen with a 200 point model. That was stupid as shit. And then what ends up happening is one guardsman with a Melta, they do the rule where the commissar shoots one of his own guys, so he passes the morale test. And then that model charges my lines and kills a Space Marine, charges my lines again, kills a Space Marine with a Melta. And then we're like, damn, this guardsman badass. Like we need to kidnap this guy, and we're going to say that he's a 16-year-old, and we're going to kidnap him and turn him into a Space Marine. But what I had was I had power fists, And so it's like, easy day. I'm going to roll power fist and we're going to knock him out and we're going to kidnap him. Well, what ends up happening is the other guy makes the rule. He's like, no, you can't use a power fist, because if you use a power fist, you're going to kill him. You need to knock him on the back of the head with your base level strength. Well, I roll for 2 rounds and I fail both rounds. And so this guardsman who had slagged 2 Space Marines with a Melta, he survives and he doesn't get kidnapped and turned into a Space Marine. He just stays a badass guardsman. And those are the kind of cinematic moments that I love about tabletop.
Yeah, for sure.
It's really fun.
If we don't agree on anything this evening, we definitely agree on that then. So
now we can debate.
Yeah, I very much respect your commitment to role playing while tabletopping in 40K. Not many do that. Okay. We are going to go ahead and get started with our main event. Let me pull up this other document. 1 second. Here we go. Okay. So let's do this. Zip, when you are ready.
Absolutely. All rise for the Honorable Judge Kafka Esquire.
Okay. Hey there, everybody. Welcome to ECourt. Okay. You all be seated. Bailiff, please proceed.
All right, we've all come to this bench trial today to resolve a dispute between the parties, Connor, aka Counterpoints, and Reason Riffs. Be hearing arguments regarding tit-for-tat strategy. Is tit-for-tat a viable political strategy? This is not a forum for discussion or an exploration of ideas. It's an adversarial trial with the pursuit of resolution. Judge will be adjudicating this dispute and act as a fact finder. This means that all questions come from the judge, except when they don't, and will be answered by the parties. Parties won't speak with one another, except when they do. Nor will they interrupt the discussions between our judge and the other party.
While I'm a practicing attorney and this show is styled to resemble a court of law, this is not an official legal proceeding in any way. This show also is in no way an arbitration of any dispute therein. My final opinion, if any, is not legally binding, nor shall it constitute legal advice in any way. The content of this show is merely for the entertainment of the audience who views it. The bailiff, myself, and any person related to the production of the show, and the participants all understand and agree with the foregoing statement.
All right. Both our parties have submitted position statements and evidence before this trial began. They both had the opportunity to review each other's evidence, and they've had the opportunity to give any extra information to the judge for him to consider during the interrogations of the parties. And after, we'll probably make some of the stuff available to y'all.
All right. To the parties, as mentioned before, I expect you to speak only to me and when spoken to. You'll be given every opportunity to address the arguments and statements of the opposing party. I will determine when to speak to each party and when to cut off a line of questioning. Do not attempt to assist me. I recommend that you answer questions directly, then provide any supporting evidence or argument. If you're unable to answer a direct question, I will infer an answer. Your inability to answer will be included in such an inference. If I find your behavior to be disruptive, I'll direct the bailiff to mute your microphone when not directly addressed. I'd also recommend that you refer to the document provided, allowing you to see what options you have as actions as parties. Objections are available. You can also do a sidebar, which allows you both to address each other directly. We'll go over that again once we get to the end of this long speech.
Correct. We shall. And to everybody watching in the chat, so thank you for watching, firstly, in Connor's and mine's. If you guys want to submit questions to ask our parties, Connor and Reason Riffs, type them in my chat. I'm going to be compiling some stuff into an amicus brief, and sprinkled here through and through. I'll be giving these to our judge, and we'll be asking our parties the questions. Questions could be for anybody. I'll keep track of the most interesting ones. If you don't know a message or something, then you will get priority. Yep.
Okay, and so for the parties, our objections, you can object to just about anything, though you need to defend it. All right, if you object, I'm going to pause the line of questioning and we're going to see what your objection is. If I think it was the objection was worthwhile, then I might end that line of questioning. If not, you risk being muted for the rest of that line of interrogation. I'm asking you to use it when you really think you need it, not just when you might disagree with somebody. If you disagree with someone, I will give you every chance to respond. If you guys think that my interrogation is going too slow and you want to just go head to head, whoever is not presenting their argument can call a sidebar whenever they want. You get one. That's going to give you 5 minutes of head-to-head action with the other party. I will not interrupt it unless I think it's getting too hairy or something like that. Connor, you're going to be arguing in the affirmative. So you're going to give the first opening statement and presentation of argument. Reason Riffs, you're going to be presenting second. If you want, you can wait to do your opening statement until you present your argument, or you can do your opening statement directly after Connor's. Which would you prefer?
I think I would just I'll make my opening statement directly after Connor's. It's relatively short. So.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Okay, and then Connor, whenever you're ready, go right ahead.
Yeah, just so my argumentation is actually lined up with my document.
Sure.
Can I pull it up somehow? Or
Yeah,
can
you
you guys
can.
pull it up somehow?
You can refer to your documents that you have, anything like that. That's fine.
I don't think I saved it. I think I just put it on your guys' drive.
Oh,
Yeah,
it should be on the drive. I
so-
can send you a link to it. You want
Okay,
so I
yeah.
can.
Can you real quick? Just because
Yeah.
if I go on like a long-winded, unrelated rant, I don't think that's a good way to start it.
You can either read your position statement or you can just give one that's not your position statement. Your opening statement is whatever you want it to be. So don't feel like you're
in
confined
our
by
chat.
that position statement.
Okay, and then sorry, real quick. You where did you send it to me? You sent it to me on Discord real quick?
In our group DM.
Okay. Let me click on it because I do think that I want to keep my position statement relatively grounded in what I submitted. So, the position is that the tit-for-tat strategy is a race to the bottom. Republican successes have largely been due to a misframing of political reciprocity using unpopular left-wing behavior as a reason to excuse their own bad behavior. Moderates who decide elections are the people to cater to. Running to the fringes politically on behavior alienates the people you wish most to attract. And what I would additionally, how long is my opening statement?
Let's keep it under 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll easily be able to. So what I would say is that the right wing has been engaged in egregious behavior. I think we can all agree on that over the past decade. Whether you're talking about the overthrow or attempted overthrow of the government through the fake elector scheme in January 6, 2021, if you're talking about basically the violent language that Trump is currently engaged in today, where he's calling people who called for the military to obey their oaths of office, he called them seditious traitors deserving of death. There's an endless amount of bad behavior. Even right now, we were just reviewing how right-wing media pundits, despite claiming to be socially conservative, are sweeping for an ephebophilic sex trafficking ring in reference to Trump because they're effectively Trump cultists. There's no amount of endless bad behavior from the right wing that is not in dispute. What I would argue, though, is that tit for tat, while it can be a viable strategy in the fact that reciprocity is typically how humans operate, within the political binary, if the left was to argue for tit for tat, then you would need to do the same things. You would need to try to overthrow the Republic of the United States. You would need to sweep for ephebophilic sex trafficking rings. You would need to use propaganda in order to lie to the American people to win politics. And I think this is how we are going to destroy the Republic if we engage for tit for tat. Also, I think it opens up uncomfortable boxes. If we engage in politics as a binary, where there is this thing called the left, and there's this thing called the right, and that is the political tribe to which we are set, then within the past 6 months, there was a left winger who shot a right winger and killed them. Are we actually going to be advocating that we should engage in political assassination because the other side did so? This is why I believe that these behavioral arguments are a race to the bottom, and it's going to destroy our republic. Actually, one more point before I could give up my time. Also, these things have had deleterious effects. They've had negative effects on the person advocating for them. Destiny has argued that rhetorical tit for tat is necessary in order to fight fire with fire in reference to the right wing. Well, guess what? When he fought fire with fire, when he said that Republicans are acting so poorly, they should be afraid of violence in reference to their advocacy for poor positions, what ended up happening? He got demonetized. As a result, he's a less effective rhetorician and advocate because he was civilly sanctioned for his behavior. So once again, like, this is a race to the bottom. It's going to destroy our republic. It's fraying our social fabric. It has negative consequences. And I don't even necessarily believe that you guys believe your own position. So with that, I'll yield the floor / time.
Great. Real quick, I apologize, everybody. I misspoke earlier saying that Connor was in the affirmative. It's Reason Riff's in the affirmative. Connor is in the negative. So, Connor, thank you for your opening statement. Reason Riffs, let's go ahead and get your opening statement. Please include, and once you're done with that, we're going to go over what we're going to use as tit for tat for our definition. I still want to hear y'all's opening statement without it. I want to have a quick discussion with both parties about what we are going to consider as tit for tat for this discussion. And then we're going to go into arguments. So Reason Riffs, you go right ahead.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your opening statement, Connor, and I understand a little bit more where we agree and disagree. So I will perhaps try and really address you in this regard. So I think one of the key things is to delineate here between what is rhetorically framed as what is being said and what the actions actually are. So we can see that actions aren't always the same as what is being described, but especially by the other side. And frankly, to some extent, we have to ignore that because that can always be framed however it wants to be framed. The other question is then, okay, if it's not a tit for tat strategy, if you want to be critical of it, you have to pose a genuine alternative. And I don't see a genuine, reasonable alternative that's not some variant of tit for tat, which I think we'll go into the definition in a minute, we'll clarify. We've also seen historically, and this is something we do agree on, and in the US context, and it's not just in the US context we see this, but that the Republicans have misbehaved and been atrocious and have slowly eroded and destroyed democracy in the US. I argue that in some cases the Democrats have aided and abetted this through appeasement. And I think realistically that's the alternative is tit for tat or appeasement at this point. So there isn't really many more things to say on the matter. There is the actual application of the game theory of tit for tat, and that has its ambiguities in itself, and I think that's a place where we disagree, and probably agree more than we disagree if we look at how I would consider that being applied. And then there are variants of tit for tat for more complex models. So the original tit for tat was between two players, and it was simply a binary system of either defect or aid and cooperate. But that doesn't include noise, for example. And so you've got generous tit for tat, which is an offshoot of tit for tat itself. And I include in my description here generous tit for tat, for example. So I'm not stating that tit for tat is a perfect strategy in all applications. I'm not saying it's always perfectly clear as to how it will be utilized, but there are clearly cases historically where it hasn't been utilized and it's only aided and allowed the Republicans to misbehave. And I use the analogy of a child that keeps throwing its toys out of the pram. Do you keep putting that toy back in the pram, or do you at some point no longer put the toy back in the pram such that the child stops learning to throw the toys out of the pram? So I think on that analogy, I'll close my statement.
Thank you. Okay. And so when we're talking about tit for tat strategy, I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. It's a strategy in which we have two parties and they have the option of collaborating or acting selfishly to the detriment of the other party. They have the choice to make one of those two things, and neither side knows what the other side is going to make that choice until the choice happens. Okay. And whenever we're saying tit for tat, we say that because of we're going to make the same choice as the other side's previous choice, essentially, right? So if the other side said collaborate, we are going to collaborate. If the other side, their previous choice was they're going to act selfishly, we're going to act selfishly. And we're going to do that until they start acting like they're going to cooperate again. Okay, is that a fair summation of what we're talking about for tit for tat strategy?
Yeah, I would maybe add that it has an implication of like negative reciprocity, where
Okay.
oftentimes it's used negatively. But I also agree that it's not necessarily negative. So, for instance, like you said, if the other part becomes collaborative, you mirror their collaboration, and the hope
Right.
is that eventually they will mirror collaboration.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure we understand that. And then, are there any other terms that we want to make sure we're defining now so that we don't get lost in a fight over definitions later? I didn't see any other ones, but if you guys think there is, I'm happy to explore it right now.
Yes, I mean, I wasn't particularly clear in my opening statement on this, so forgive me if it's my lack of clarity that's brought this about. But the reciprocity could be in reciprocating cooperation, but it can also be reciprocating defection. So in both cases, that is a reciprocal action. You're mirroring in terms of the behavior in terms of whether you're not cooperating or cooperating. So defection is a synonym for non-cooperation. So if I use defection, I mean non-cooperation in this sense. And the other thing was that there was this notion of generous tit for tat. And to clarify this is given in the evidence of the offshoots of tit for tat. It simply means that 5 to 10% of the time, which is one of the optimal percentages they found, if you just randomly cooperate occasionally rather than purely reciprocating, this can be a little bit more beneficial than pure tit for tat. But I would argue, so sorry.
We can get into that once we're in your argument.
Okay.
Connor, I apologize. I know I said you're going first, but we do like the affirmative argument to go first, just so they can make the argument and then the affirmative can come in, or the negative can come in. So Reason Riffs, we're going to go to you first. So I appreciate your argument, though I would like to hear why you think, or how you would explain that tit for tat is not a mutually assured destruction. If I do tit for tat, I'm not looking down the barrel of everything being destroyed. And why does it not result in that?
Well, from a purely theoretical standpoint, which is not the only standpoint, but it's one that's sort of the clearest. When you implement a tit for tat strategy, you discourage the other side from non-cooperation by making it less rewarding. And so you see that if you implement this kind of strategy, rather than purely cooperating or purely defecting and non-cooperating, that the other side is more likely to actually go towards cooperation in the medium to long term. In practice, we've seen this historically. When appeasement has been put in place, it's very nice in the short term. There's no suffering, right? But in the longer term, it means the other side continues to defect, to grow, and to take up and use more and more of the good nature of the other side. So it's about the medium to long-term perspective. The short term, that there can be some disadvantage. There is, of course, a loss of easiness and certainty in the shortest of terms. But in the longer term, it actually reduces the overall suffering and loss that can occur, and is often minimal. So that's shown on a theoretical basis, but it's also, you can see historical examples of that. I also gave some of those as evidence.
Okay, so Connor, whenever I've heard your arguments about tit for tat, and I don't think I've heard you make the mutually assured destruction argument. Are you worried at all about that? About this, and maybe not necessarily like in the moment, they're going to immediately destroy each other, but kind of a runaway. I think you said a race to the bottom, and I think that's similar kind of to this mutually assured destruction. Like in your mind, you think the tit for tat's going to just force us into a civil war that is so horrible that it just basically ends America? Is that am I summarizing that correctly?
I'm hoping we're smarter than that. But yeah, like as an example, I appreciate Reason Riff's not being autistic in his definition, where like for instance, something that I thought was brought up was interesting, that tit for tat with 10% or whatever reciprocity is actually something that's like a better game theory or something like that. I appreciate the lack of autism in reference to that argument. But yeah, like if we were being hyper fixated on tit for tat, then we would say that everything the Republicans have done should be negatively mirrored by the opposition. And I think there are some behaviors that are so negative from the right wing, they should not be reciprocated. I would cite the fake elector scheme. Actually, gerrymandering, we should probably talk about at some point. There's a whole host of bad behaviors that the right wing has engaged in that if reciprocated by the left, it would probably mean the doom of the republic.
Well, I think that leads into kind of my second question to Reason Riffs, where, whether we get to that end state of doom of the republic, I think that you would agree that in the short term, at the very least, there's a destabilizing effect to tit for tat. We're asking very powerful groups to act in, harmful ways, right? I mean, there's going to be negative externalities coming from this, and like, how do you determine how do you gauge that
Mhm.
and then make that determination that that's okay versus other strategies that might not be as destabilizing?
Well, I think this is a good opportunity to make a point that I felt that Connor's argument was somewhat of a straw man argument in regards to framing the negativity of the reciprocal action. Because, and it's understandable because in the theory, you just defect, right? And a defect looks like a defect and it looks like the same thing, which it is in terms of the theory. But in practice, there are many ways in which you can defect. So you don't have to replicate the means, but the magnitude and the direction, right? So what they might do that's considered illegal, you don't have to break the law just because they broke the law, but you have to non-cooperate to the same strength and level such that it harms them as much as you will harm yourself. So I believe Democrats, frankly, are more intelligent than Republicans and are able thus, and with a level of self-control Republicans don't have, and thus are able to reciprocate in a way of defecting and not cooperating with them, but in a way that's a little bit more intelligent. And I can give you examples of that. I'll yield.
Well, 1 second. I think that let's start with the wide view with that. Connor, what do you think about this idea that he's presenting here, where it's a tit for tat, but maybe it's not that we're going to perfectly mirror their actions, but we're going to say, okay, that action was of this magnitude and it caused this amount of harm to us. So we're going to take a legal, maybe a institutional based action that will harm them, to the same magnitude, right? So like the shutdown, maybe the shutdown that was legal for the Democrats to do, and let's say they do that in response to illegal actions of the Republicans, but the magnitude of harm to each party is equal. How do you view that kind of tit for tat?
Yeah, I think that's infinitely preferable, obviously,
Okay.
and as a matter of fact, I think that would probably be the differentiation between you use the word appeasement. I'm not for appeasement. I don't like appeasement. I don't think it's smart. I think that power abhors a vacuum, and I was going to bring up elections as kind of like the reciprocal power that should respond to the abuses of the Republicans. However, as an example, I would bring up. I want to bring forward gerrymandering if you'll indulge me real quick.
I'm happy
So
to.
gerrymandering, we live in a representative republic, and gerrymandering, as far as I understand it, is drawing borders around districts specifically so that your political opposition does not gain seats that it would otherwise be entitled to, and that's
Right.
gerrymandering. And so there were conservative governments, conservative state governments that were openly saying, we're going to gerrymander on purpose and we are going to rob the Democrats of 10 to 15 seats. And California responded with Proposition 50, which is legal. It was voted for by the public. The governor signed it into law. It's a perfectly legal action. And they engaged in gerrymandering that effectively, I think, nullified and might have scared the Republicans off of that dangerous course of action. But I think we can both agree that while legal and while tit for tat, if the Republicans follow through on their desire to gerrymander districts, we still have disenfranchised voters. And so that's kind of like the concession that I want people to understand is that when we're engaging in this reciprocity, if we're talking about losing the Republic, then obviously gerrymander, because losing the Republic is more important than disenfranchised voters. But we still need to acknowledge that negative harm that we have done, because now we have disenfranchised voters in red states and we have disenfranchised voters in blue states. And the system is kind of fucked in a way that's difficult to unfuck. And
Okay.
so that is where my frustration with Stephen, because let's be real, this is about Stephen's course of action. Stephen's
Sure.
course of action, number one, it didn't seem to recognize the harm being done by playing into negative tit for tat. It also didn't seem to carry the nuance that's being brought up here today, where maybe you reciprocate part of the time in order to encourage cooperation, and then also maybe you do legal shit. I feel like that nuance was not forwarded by the person who sparked this conversation.
That's fair. And Connor, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're advocating, at the very least, or at least, saying you're giving approval of some kind of virtuous tit for tat. I think it's kind
Yeah.
of what we're discussing here.
Well,
And I
and
think,
legality is one of my principal concerns. I would say legality was always one of my principal concerns, because when you say, "Oh, I'm going to engage in tit for tat" or whatever, I don't think like Steven's a criminal. But at the same time, like let's Tucker Carlson technically doesn't commit crimes, even though he engages in what I believe to be stochastic rhetoric that would lead to violence. So I don't
well,
want Steven to become a stochastic rhetorician that leads to
that's
violence in order to legally tit for tat with Tucker
let's
Carlson.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Let's table that line real quick because I do want to come back to Reason Riffs. Reason, I believe you had something. If you want to give me a quick response to that, that's fine. I have another question that's going to follow up.
Yeah,
on
I
what
would,
you
I would like to respond to that because as much, let's not confuse Destiny's ambiguity with having contradicted, frankly, anything of what I'm suggesting of the strategy here. He's never really spoken in detail about the application of the strategy. Moreover, in terms of the general tit-for-tat strategy, we've had our five, or forgive me for saying I'm not an American, but you've had, as someone on the good side in America, the 5-10% of the generous part of the generous tit-for-tat. And now is the time, frankly, for some harsher tit-for-tat. And I feel like for a decade now, Democrats have feared the harm in the short term, and it's caused or played a role in the harm in the long term. That might be something that Destiny would disagree with me on, but I don't want to put words in his mouth. But he has been ambiguous for good and for bad, which has been provocative, but it hasn't been that he's staunchly taken something contradictory to what I've said, or frankly, staunchly said anything particularly terrible. I can't speak for his intent. That's speculation, and you would object rightfully on that part.
I think we're not going to read some implicate. I don't think we'll read intent into Destiny's speech, but I think we can say the negative space that's left by him not clarifying is not to his benefit in Connor's argument. He's saying that negative space puts Connor on edge, the sense that he doesn't know necessarily if it's going there. And with that, I would like to ask, I think Reason Riffs, you would obviously also agree with the virtuous form of tit for tat, but when it comes to tit for tat strategy,
objection. In terms of definition here, there is no such thing as a virtuous form or non-virtuous form of tit for tat. Effective in terms of the strategy. We're talking about application, but that really isn't necessarily the debate here. We're talking a priori whether tit for tat is a bad strategy, right?
Well, one second. No. I'm only saying in the sense that I don't think there's any part of the quote the novel term we're saying here of saying if you want to respond to their actions with only legal actions right now, that's not something that you would necessarily disagree
legal
with.
Or moral.
Yeah.
Can we agree on legal or moral?
Sure. But then I want us to now move into the next part and say, okay, we've carved out that area that tit for tat makes sense there. Okay. When I'm looking at tit for tat strategy now, am I saying, are we then extending it also to violence? And if not, well, let's say violence for immediate self-defense. I don't think anybody here has a huge issue with that as far as tit for tat strategy. But then beyond that, tit for tat for violence outside of immediate self-defense. How do you feel about that? Reason said, I'm not asking you to Fed post right now. We're speaking hypothetically. We're saying in an environment in which there is a tit for tat strategy, not even a political one, but tit for tat strategy involving violence that is not immediate self-defense. How do you view that in your version of tit for tat?
Well, I don't think violence, in terms of if you anticipate violence, you can always frame it as defensive, right? And I'd have to be so hypothetical in any applicable context right now to suggest that violence is warranted. But the idea of just outwardly saying violence is always wrong as part of the strategy, I think it's a bit like saying murder is always wrong and then giving a bunch of exceptions. So I think it would be disingenuous to say that violence is always wrong, even if it's not viewed directly as against your harm in the short term.
Let me phrase this maybe a little bit easier. Does your version is this tit for tat strategy we're discussing right now, is it the alternative to violence, or is it within the system in which violence could happen at some point, or are we doing this to try to avoid violence?
Tit for tat is a tool, okay? And how you use that tool can be in an intelligent way, which is what I was trying to pose before, which I think is what the synonym for virtuous in this regard.
Sure.
But in terms of how that tool applies, it's very much contextual, right? And in the context we're talking about now in terms of the US, that I can see no space for anything near violence, physical or even verbal. And that's another issue, by the way, the rhetorical side of things. So it depends on how speculative you want to be with this. I mean, we can be very speculative, but I don't think that's helps the debate and discussion.
Well, one second, Connor. I think that's fine. Reason, I don't want us to get too deep into the violence thing, Fed posting aside and other things. I think it's a little too too much, but I do want to just touch on this point with you and Connor real quick. Connor, I know that you own and make guns, and I know that you are a Second Amendment defender and self-defense advocate. However, I want to hear your thoughts on this, because I think you would agree that tit for tat, immediate harm, violence makes sense. Do you, in your mind, do you see a tit for tat as a alternative to violence, or do you think that it is a tool, like Reason Riff might argue and say that that's not really an appropriate question to ask about it? As far
No,
as is it
I think I can answer all of this without Fed posting, just because of my law enforcement background. So effectively, like what I'm advocating for with liberals in particular is like somebody said, legal self-defense. So we should not embrace violence. Most people who embrace violence are either psychopaths, sociopaths, sadistic, traumatic, they're traumatized, they're something. We should never embrace violence, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be prepared for violence. And so what I think is that liberal or progressive allergy to firearms and self-defense topics is actually a weakness, a weakness that conservatives who are more comfortable with violence potentially could take advantage of. So shoring up that weakness is important. I do think that any violence that does happen should be legal and defensive. But just even arguing from a historical perspective, there's of course times where extra legal violence could be justified. And I'll use Colombia as an example. In Colombia, law enforcement was so corrupt where either half of them were anti-cartel militias and half of them were bought and paid for by the cartel, that the anti-cartel militias and civilians eventually formed a militia group that went on to fight with Pablo Escobar, because Pablo Escobar was consistently getting out of prison, getting reduced sentences, being ignored by corrupt officials, participating in assassinations, participating in terrorism, participating in the killing of cops. It was so egregious that effectively the social contract had been violated to the point that extra legal and extrajudicial violence was taken upon by the citizenry because legality and morality were no longer lined up. Now, that being said, I think I'm with Reason that we're not there yet. There are definitely lines that MAGA could cross where they effectively take the entirety of the republic and throw it out the window. And if they threw, like, for instance, let's say Trump said, I'm dictator for life. And enough of the military and enough of Trump's base said, yeah, he's dictator for life. We don't care what the Constitution says. At that point, it's time.
Okay, that's fine. We'll go ahead and pause that. We'll stray back away from the violence talk. Reason. Let's look into. I'm sorry, Mr. Riffs. Let's go into something that I want to make sure I understand why we would advocate for tit for tat over other strategies, and I'm going to give you some to contend with. Why do you think that a tit for tat strategy in the current political climate is better than a civil disobedience? And if we need to, I can define civil disobedience as we want to discuss it, unless both parties feel comfortable discussing it without one.
Can I just reply to Connor's comment before?
Let's do a quick reply, and then
it's really quick to simply to saying I actually think in terms of the bar for violence, we sound basically in agreement on that. Okay, so he's basically voicing my own position with regards to that. Okay. So sorry, can you restate your comment, your question?
Sure. So I'm wondering why we would use in the current political climate in America, why we should be advocating for a tit for tat strategy over civil disobedience.
Well, again, this is let's delineate civil disobedience from tit for tat. I mean, civil disobedience could be an implementation of tit for tat, right? Whether it be strikes of the federal workforce could be very effective if the Democrats called for that. So tit for tat in itself, as I say, is just a tool. How you apply it takes a little bit of imagination. And I think that a lack of imagination, how that's applied historically in the past 10 years, has been true of the Democrats. So forgive the lack of clarity with regards to my memory with this, but if you look at Supreme Court justices and the blocking in, was it 2016, just before, I think Trump had already been elected, but Obama was trying to push forward his nominee, and it was blocked by the Republicans. And then when Amy Coney was coming in very, very similar circumstances towards the end of the term, The Democrats didn't bother to push against that. And this is a great example of what I mean. I think Democrats need to be a bit, have a bit of more of a spine and threaten things that in the short term may be a little bit uncomfortable. And I don't mean anything illegal here, but it could also be civil disobedience in again a non-violent way. But that's about the implementation side of tit for tat, not about tit for tat itself.
Okay, well, so then you're saying tit for tat's a tool. It feels like tit for tat might be kind of an ethos or a strategy by which we're applying these other things, right? Like I feel like tit for tat is saying like you're talking about the application of your different kind of smaller tools or strategies, right? So I'm imagining you would have the same answer for say nonviolence, akin to kind of the Indian Revolution or American Civil Rights. You'd say the same thing. Of that would just be folded into the tit for tat rather than being its own independent strategy.
Exactly. I think black people in America today have the rights they have because tit for tat was employed.
So Connor, whenever I'm thinking about tit for tat, and you're, we've discussed this kind of virtue tit for tat that might be what you're advocating for. In your mind, do you see an alternative to replace tit for tat with right here? Do you think that whenever we see the Republicans do something incredibly heinous, like very, very, very clearly attacking the Republic, trying to destroy the Republic, do you see a different strategy from tit for tat or just a different way of applying it than what you've been hearing advocated?
No, not trying to be like, oh, blood sports debate, you suck, but like, no, this is infinitely more reasonable than what Steven is advocating for, and I do think that like reciprocity, if you're being smart, is intelligent. So for instance, like let's say that Prop 50 had been proposed by California, and then every Republican freaked out and they said, "Whoops, our bad. We didn't mean to open up Pandora's box. We're backing off of that topic." Then the tit for tat response, I think, would be not the Democrats proceeding with Prop 50. They would have said, "Oh, okay, we backed off of the cliff. Let's back off of the cliff as well." And so that's still legal. That's still reciprocal. It's still intelligent. I'm okay with that. I think that due to the lack of clarity in reference to tit for tat, I was probably operating with the autistic definition of number one, there's never reciprocity because effectively like reciprocity would be some people call that appeasement, right? But I think that what Reason said is that maybe 10% of the time, maybe 5% of the time, you actually show a willingness to collaborate in order to encourage collaboration. That's brilliant. And then also adding in the safeguards of legality and adding in the safeguards of morality, I think also means that just because somebody on your team gets politically assassinated doesn't mean that you politically assassinate the opposite side. It means that let's say that person was in charge of logistics for the DNC or something, and there's some kind of like protest that you can do that would fuck up the logistics of the RNC, and so because they took through extra legal and violence, they take out your logistics capacity, you take out their logistics capacity through legal moral means. I'm not opposed to that whatsoever. That's obviously intelligent. But I just need to emphasize this. Steven himself, and I know I'm involving a third party, just as an example, yesterday, we were debating this last night. He was saying that the correct tit for tat in reference to what's going on in the American government right now is convicting all of the Trump administration of insurrection because by participating in the Trump administration, they have been supporting an insurrectionist. And then when I asked him for like specific crimes that have been committed by members of the cabinet that would warrant this criminal charge and barring from office, he got really fucking vague with it. And not only did he get vague with it, I think that he was implying that we'll fabricate a case, and if they get convicted, they get convicted. And for me,
so objection speculation. I have to.
We're actually going to take this objection in real quick, Connor, because
Sure.
I actually came into that call right after you left and discussed the legal methods by which it could be done. That doesn't take away from the fact that that's what Destiny advocated with his own statements. So I'm not going to say that you're incorrect to say that. But we will say that I think that you're right to say that he is not advocating for the legal methods in that time when he said it. However, I'm going to actually agree with Reason Riffs here on the speculation aspect of, I think that we are talking about that negative space, right? I think we've already all come together and said, hey, there's some negative space in Destiny's statements that make certain people uneasy. I think that's fair to make that critique here. But I don't think anybody here's going to defend that. So we don't need to, I don't want to explore that negative space too much anymore. Connor, if you've got anything more you want to say on that, let's avoid the negative space. You can. I've got 2 more questions for Mr. Riffs, and then I'm going to come back over to you for that negative argument.
Yeah, sure. I would just say that these additional intelligent caveats, I think like so for instance, just keeping it on the topic. Tit for tat sounds like negative reciprocity. Adding in the caveat of cooperation to encourage cooperation some of the time within game theory, awesome. And then also keeping it legal and moral, that actually alleviates a majority of my objections to the strategy.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Points. Mr. Riffs, whenever we're talking about cooperation, very specifically in the American political context, it seems like we're kind of begging a question or baking in some ideas by saying cooperation, because how are we supposed to say that it's cooperation when a lot of the times to the Republicans, it's probably going to feel like to them, we just have to do what the Democrats say, right? Let's look back at the shutdown fight. You know, the Democrats said, this is what we want. If y'all don't give us this, we're not going to open the government. Now, it's easy for us to frame that as cooperation, but I think from the Republicans' perspective, they might frame that as, well, we have to go along with the Democrats and agree with them, and then they will let us open the shutdown. Do you see where I'm coming at with this? Where sometimes I have a hard time seeing whether or not Republicans will see it as cooperation. Does that make sense? Because I feel like what we're doing is we're saying Democrats, don't open the government, don't cooperate, and force them to come cooperate with you. And the Republicans might say, well, this isn't really cooperation for us. This is us capitulating to their demands. And so now we need to get back at them for that. Well, so how do we overcome that framing?
Well, I think, well, exactly. You used the key word here, framing, right? So again, the strategy itself is not a strategy of rhetorical framing. It's a strategy of the effect of your action. And the framing, if you look at the studies on populism, this is something we have to be really careful about, is populism survives and thrives on victimization of itself. They're the ultimate snowflakes. So you mustn't feed this victim narrative that they're trying to pursue. Now, of course, they're going to try and pursue it. It doesn't matter what you do. They are going to state that they have been victimized. There's no cooperation going on. But in terms of the effect, cooperation favors them, even though they may be a little bit grumpy outwardly and in terms of how they frame it, because that's the way they do, that's how they self-identify as the victims. In practice, they've got a little bit easier that time round when they've had cooperation reciprocated. And the politicians will learn that. And so however they frame it, we're not in control of that, right? That's how they want to frame it. Their media wants to frame it. You have to kind of, to some extent, ignore that, because they're going to frame it whatever suits their agenda. That's not because of the actual action behind your political action, what you've done. So we should ignore that.
Well, let me follow that up, because I like how you talked about framing there, and I want to see this. So, do you think that, and I've heard some discussion around this, and I really like this idea, not just because my Christian bias, but do you think that there should be more grace in victory from the Republicans? So let's say we had that shutdown, and let's say the Republicans go, fuck, you know what, fine, we'll do the healthcare thing, we'll let you guys do it, and now we can reopen the government. Should the Democrats have come out and said, hey, everybody, we cooperated with the Republicans, and the Republicans worked with us to reopen the government. This is a victory for both sides of the aisle. Or should the Democrats have come out and rubbed the Republicans' nose in it and said, fuck them, we got it, we owned them, this is awesome, fuck Trump? In your mind, which framing should I be using in tit for tat?
Well, I mean, are we talking about the strategy from the Republicans' perspective or the Democrats' perspective at this point?
Democrats' perspective, doing tit for tat. Democrats.
Okay, but we shouldn't expect at this point in time. It's like going back to this analogy of a badly behaved child, right? When you start disciplining the child in the right way, and that involves carrot and stick, yeah, then the child's going to be really grumpy at first. You're not going to see much. I mean, forgive me, I'm not a parent, so if this is an analogy falls flat in his face, then so be it. But I do think there's an aspect of a child that's not experienced enough balance between stick and carrot, and when they start to experience that, they're going to be grumpy. They're going to be annoyed, right? And that's where the Republicans are now. But what you're going to create in the future, right? And this is the thing, is about the patience Democrats are going to have, is a Republican Party that I can foresee Connor being able to rejoin again. Because it will be that kind of party that says, you cooperated there. And historically, we've seen this in the Republicans. They've been wonderfully acknowledging of cooperation, right?
But I want a direct answer on this one. The Democrats win the shutdown. They get what they want out of the shutdown. Chuck Schumer comes on TV that night and he's going to say one or two things. He's going to say, this was great. We got to work with the Republicans. They came to us and we cooperated and got this done. Or does Chuck Schumer say, haha, fuck you losers. Democrats won this one and we're going to keep fucking winning. What is the
rhetorically, it shouldn't be too black and white. I think the problems for Democrats, right, were that it was all a bit disorganized how they ended the shutdown, and so the messaging wasn't very clear around it. But in an ideal world, they could vocalize the cooperation, and as you pointing out here, I think this is what you're insinuating. There shouldn't be a vindictive element at all rhetorically to what Democrats say. That aspect of the rhetoric does not help from the politicians. But let's not assume that what the politicians say are what necessarily political pundits should say, because what they might say may lead to a debate like we're having right now, which wouldn't have happened if they weren't a little bit ambiguous and provocative.
And I'm not asking you to solve the whole thing. I'm just kind of trying to get an idea of holistic, kind of more like, okay, the Democrats do this strategy. How are we then moving forward and looking at it? That is the last question that I have for you, Reason Riff. Connor, I want to make sure you have a chance to respond to anything he said. If there's a part where you feel like you didn't get to respond to something, now's the time. Feel free to bring it up. And then Reason Riff will come back to you, and then we'll go into Connor, or we'll do an amicus brief and then go into Connor's argument.
Yeah, so one of the things that we bumped into through that conversation that I want to address is also my anxiety about populism. I don't like populism. I think that the mob, we're in a representative democracy for a reason. If you look at the founding fathers, they believe that the elites of our society should be elected into office so they can craft technocratic policy that's good for everyone. Unfortunately, it feels like Republicans and to some degree Democrats have abdicated in that responsibility for the past 50 years, and they've let really, really bad systemic issues fester. And I think that's causing radicalism, and it's causing the popularity of populism. The reason why I'm anxious about populism when it comes to tit for tat is because people can look at Trump's effectiveness when it comes to rallying the populist base. They can look at him playing on the anxieties of economic and social anxiety, and they can say, damn, that's really effective. Let's go ahead and adopt that strategy. And I think my fear with that, particularly with the left, is not only does that naturally fall in with the left, because the left historically have been advocates for the people, but also I think there's some really, really nefarious characters who are waiting in the wings to basically seize power upon a left-wing populist wave. By that, I mean that we have a socialist mayor in New York. We have people like Hassan Piker, who unfortunately are some of the most popular voices on the left wing. There are authoritarian leftists who, while unpopular now, they could be popular in a decade. And so my anxiety is that what I effectively watch happen on the right is bad behavior consistently get rewarded and dismissed as not important because that bad behavior was fringe, it was nominal, it was a part of a fluke of politics or whatever excuses they came up with. It became the norm. And so I don't want to excuse bad behavior on the left because I'm afraid that the identical thing will happen where once again we'll have a race to the bottom, mutually assured destruction. And I was just discussing this with my chat. If we break this system, what waits for us is anarchic reciprocal violence, similar to like failed states all across the globe. And I'm not interested in that.
No, I think that's totally fair. And we're going to get into some of that whenever we come to your argument. I do want to touch on some of those things. I just want to make sure we finish out Mr. Riffs pretty well. Thank you, Mr. Points. Mr. Riffs, is there any points that you feel like you didn't get to make or anything that you feel like wasn't addressed for your affirmative argument? You will get a chance to critique Connor's arguments whenever we get to his.
Well, I mean, can I respond to Connor's point there? Because I was going to object in some respects, but I also like the fact he was in flow and wanted to hear what he had to say.
That's fine. Let's go ahead and do one. Let's not take too much time though, because you are going to get plenty of time.
Well, it's just speculative about Mandani, and he also condemned Hassan. So I'm open to seeing whether he's a bad or good influence on American politics, but I don't think he's the mirror of Trump. I have hope, and I think he may actually be a force for good for the Democrats. But we'll wait and see. The proof will be in what he actually does.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's well said. I think that's good. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call it for the affirmative argument for Mr. Riffs, and I appreciate both parties on that. We're going to go over to the bailiff. Bailiff, did we have an amicus brief ready?
We do. We have just a few questions for amicus brief. Reminder to y'all, if you want to ask either of our parties any questions, go ahead and type it in any of my chats. Switch to Superkick. We do have a couple. I have two questions from I Have Eaten Foliage, friend of the stream. How is the justice system not tit for tat for violations of law, judicial and lawful means versus lawless and reckless means? This question is for Connor, I believe. And I believe it's getting at the justice system as tit for tat in the way it behaves, and why I assume it's about some proposed disagreements with using the judiciary against Republicans.
Yeah, I'm once again, I'm happy that we all have the right kind of autism today. So that's excellent. What I would say is that arguably it's the intelligent tit for tat, not the autistic tit for tat. So as an example, if you shoplift, let's say that you steal $20 worth of shit, the state doesn't come in and steal $20 worth of your shit. That would be the autistic tit for tat. Making the example even more extreme, for murder, although we do capital punishment, oftentimes for murder, the motivation behind capital punishment is actually not like as an example, a serial killer who beats to death multiple women with a hammer. We don't beat the serial killer to death with a hammer. What we do is we euthanize them because we're effectively saying, you are such a dangerous person. You can no longer be a part of our population. You're too dangerous to release. As a result, we're putting you down. It's kind of like euthanizing a dog. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of what capital punishment is. So I think that it is the same tit for tat where legalistically as morally as we can, we're reciprocating the social harm that you have done and imposing a consequence that hopefully gets your attention, but we're not literally doing exactly what you're doing back to you. That's how I would differentiate.
Okay. I would ask Ms. Riffs, I'd ask your response. However, I realize that capital punishment was brought up, so it'll be a little easy for this one to spiral out. So let's go ahead and move to the next question.
You've hit on a bunch of points that follow up into the next few questions. So we've also got a question from Ivory. They asked, and which you kind of just addressed a bit. Last night you said to not cry about a stolen bike if the perp was arrested/tried. Kind of getting at what you just said. Does restitution factor into analysis? And I have Eden Foliage, who asked the previous question, responded in chat just now, except the state does come and steal $20 of your shit to make you pay it back and then more. What do you say to that, Connor?
I would say, and then more. So as an example, $20 like might be cash restitution to the theft, but they don't literally come into your house, inventory your personal property, and then take $20 worth of personal property. I think we can understand the difference between restitutional payments and the state literally taking $20 worth. Like so for instance, you steal a candy bar.
But it is against your will, right? You're forced to. So
what's that?
It's not stealing, but it's stealing in the way that libertarians call taxes, right?
Taking your property. Okay.
So I actually, Connor, 1 second.
The state doesn't come in and take a reciprocal amount of food, right?
Yeah,
they make you pay for the candy bar.
Connor, how do you like this? Real quick, just because I thought of this just now. You are fine with this intelligent tit for tat we just find here. You're not okay with eye for an eye. Eye for an eye is you're literally doing the same thing from one person to the other. Tit for tat, you can hear it in the name, is talking about different responses for this, back and forth maybe, but the responses are not entirely equal, right? I think that that we can talk about that.
No, I think that's well said. I am not. weirdly enough, I am for eye for an eye in certain circumstances, but I'm not for eye for an eye in general. I think turning the other cheek is better. And I also think that this more intelligent version of tit for tat is better. And sorry, there was like another part of the question though that I wanted to address. The bike. Can I address the bike thing?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
So when it comes to the bike thing, my statement is not about justice. Okay. When it comes to justice, the Trump administration should, which was the debate, should be held to account for its illicit actions. Pete Hegseth, if he violates the law in order to drone strike civilians in the Caribbean, should be held to legal account. Donald Trump, if he used the office for private gain and there's a statute that he has violated that can be proven in a court of law, he should be impeached. He should be incarcerated. However, we're dealing with a system that I think we all understand is kind of complex, but we're dealing in a system where realistically, unless the Senate flips, I very much doubt there's going to be a successful impeachment and incarceration or incrimination of Trump through 2028. I also think that when you could say it's a false tit for tat, but the Republicans are going to argue, well, the reason why Trump is comfortable pardoning himself and his cabinet and his cronies and this and that is because of the pardons of Hunter Biden in the January 6th committee. So they'll be arguing tit for tat in order to excuse their own bad behavior. Until the legislature modifies the power of the pardon, as far as I know, the power of the pardon is final. There's actually there's no way to get around it. So if you want to have a truth commission where we discuss the many sins of the Trump administration, that's fine. That's not what Destiny was arguing for, though, last night. What he was, and maybe I should leave that for specifics, but effectively that was not.
I'll ask. What do you think Destiny was arguing for then? What was the alternative that you think Destiny was arguing that wasn't that?
Yeah,
because
so
I put my own question in the amicus brief from ZipZip. Destiny's proposed targeting Republicans and barring them from office included legal avenues like charging them under the 14th Amendment as insurrectionists, and also included things such as impeaching Supreme Court justices, packing the court, constitutional amendments, possibly if you need to tighten up language on things. Is that sort of legality? Would you oppose that sort of actions?
Yeah.
Are you against that principally, or are you against that on you don't think it'll happen?
I think this is part of the negative race to the bottom, and I'll try to differentiate. So once again, if we could hold these people to legal account, we should. We can't. Now, when it comes to the shit you were talking about packing the court, I actually don't think there's technically anything legalistically standing in the way of packing the court.
Correct.
However,
Perfectly legal.
my fear is that, let's say that we have a 5-4 conservative majority in the court right now. Let's say that you just add 1 or 2 justices, or let's say you double the size of the court, but you make them all liberal.
Say you had 40, hypothetically.
What's that?
Say you added 40, hypothetically.
Added 40, sure. Then what's to stop the next conservative government from adding another 40? And what's to stop the next liberal government from adding another 40? It's a race to the bottom. And then I want to address the legal punishment for insurrectionists. If these people are guilty of insurrection, let's say that Josh Hawley, as an example, I'm pretty sure that he was in direct telephone communication with people who were involved in Stop the Steal and maybe even Proud Boys. He might have been texting them or calling them. If there is any indication that Josh Hawley, number one, doesn't get a pardon, and maybe even if he got a pardon, you could do the insurrection thing that Stephen was arguing about, then where you don't criminally convict him, but you charge him with insurrection, therefore he's barred from office.
Well, the part about insurrection, right, isn't just it's engaging in insurrection or aiding and abetting the perpetrators thereof, right? So it can include more than just. But I think Josh Hawley, it could include people who aided.
But with the aiding and abetting, I think that the aiding and abetting would be specifically like in reference to aiding them and abetting them in reference to insurrection. So for instance, like if somebody participates in insurrection,
the Supreme Court says it doesn't.
And then, I just want to finish this example. Sure. Let's say that somebody participates in insurrection, but then they get old and I help them with their groceries across the street. Well, I just aided them. Is that the intent of the law, is to, basically punish anybody who helps the person who's guilty of insurrection ever? Obviously not. I almost guarantee you that the intent of the law is aiding and abetting them specifically with an insurrection. So just to wrap it up, because I know I'm verbose, if you want to go after Josh Hawley because he's specifically guilty of insurrection, that's totally fine. However, if Marco Rubio had nothing to do with January 6, 2021, but you want to charge him after the fact with insurrection, I think that's fucking insane.
Okay. All right. How many more questions do we got? Let's try to hit
Hey,
these.
that's all.
Can I respond? Can I respond to some of Connor's points? There actually,
Come on in.
frankly, disagreed on. So I mean, I didn't hear Destiny's debate with on Wick last night, so I'm a bit of a weak spot with regards to that. But I did hear a little bit of what he said and what you've also just described now. And I don't think that those applications of because we're talking now about how tit-for-tat's applied, right? And I think, you know, packing the Supreme Court might be the thing to do. I think the problem is that it's about gauging what too much is and what too little is, right? And the risk with too little is it is appeasement, by the way. And Democrats have effectively for too long been appeasing Republicans, and they've turned them into this monster. Partly been responsible for turning them into this monster. But of course, there's the other risk of doing too much, being overzealous, and that of course can accelerate and become a form of brinkmanship, right? But I think most of the time it's avoiding risk rather than taking the right amount of risk that Democrats have done. And I think maybe the right amount of risk has come to the point of packing the Supreme Court. I also think there's imaginative ways legally you can do this as well, right? In terms of continuing to support an insurrection by denying it. So you can make the law stay alive in terms of then people start to deny it in the future, and they're starting to actively break the law. Now it's about how following the letter of the law is about the intent of the law, right? I can't foresee at this point in time Marco Rubio being considered guilty of that per se. We can see his role is one of, he's probably the only sane person in that government. I think most of us would agree on that. So it is about, the implementation is about following the intent of the law, right? It's not just, how it can be interpreted in a cold way. It's about how it's intended to be implemented. There is an aspect of that, right? Kafka.
I'll just a quick point on there. You said Marco Rubio is possibly the sanest person in the administration. We can all agree. As a Venezuelan American myself, I'm not sure if I completely agree, but
it's a low bar, right?
I understand your point, but yes, he's the sanest. Maybe not.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to pick out. Okay, Zip. Any more questions for this amicus brief?
That's all we had.
Okay, great. Then Mr. Points, you already gave us your opening statement. But I think we all have a good understanding of your position now. Mm-hmm. Going into this, I was hoping actually we'd kind of end up at the position that we kind of defined earlier, and I thought that's where you were going to go with it. However, I do want to kind of address some of the extreme actions of the Republicans and kind of the lack of action by Democrats. So whenever I see the Democrats showing restraint, I don't see a lot of acknowledgement of that restraint from the Republicans. I see a lot of irrational behavior of them claiming things happened that didn't happen, or overstating things that happened so that they can justify their even greater illegal actions. So whenever I see that kind of thing, I don't look to Democrats and go, why aren't you acting unhinged like that shit? However, it does make it hard for me to accept any kind of behavior other than a punishment or a kind of a reckoning, as some of the language we recently had. Do you think there should be? I mean, I'm not asking for appeasement here, but I'm saying, how much of a measured response do you think Democrats should have here? Because right now it seems like the Republicans are giving them kind of carte blanche to take whatever means necessary.
Yeah, but
yeah. So
one second, Mr. Riffs.
Oh, yeah,
go ahead, Mr. Points.
Oh, no, I mean this is
no, Mr. Riffs. This was to Mr. Points.
Oh, sorry. I forgot my surname for a moment there. Sorry.
If you continue interrupting, Bailiff will mute you.
Yeah, Mr. Points is the one responding to my primary question.
Sorry, I forgot my Points.
You're fine.
Can you restate your question in like a single sentence? Like,
let me get it. Yeah, sure. That was a little rambly. So whenever I see do you think that whenever I see how unhinged the Republicans are getting and how little Democrat restraint has done to kind of show the correct actions, how am I supposed to understand? How should I look at the Democrats and ask them for restraint? How can I expect restraint from the Democrats whenever Republicans are acting as severely as they are? Does that make sense?
It does. I think the problem though is we could probably bring up half a dozen false equivalencies that I do not believe to be genuine, but propagandistically they work on the right wing. And what I mean by that is if you bring up January 6th, they bring up BLM, right? If you bring up if you bring up the hammer attack on the Pelosi's, they bring up Charlie Kirk. And there's a host of reasons why these scenarios are separate, but within the mind of the Republican or within the mind of MAGA, it is reciprocal. They're allegedly engaging in negative behavior that mirrors the negative behavior of the left. And actually, a healthy chunk of them would argue that, for instance, the sweeping of the media for the BLM riots, where they're like, "Oh, fiery but mostly peaceful" or whatever. I hear that shit all the time, right? And so unfortunately, it's not illegal to be stupid in the United States of America. It's not stupid. It's not illegal to be a conspiracist. It's not illegal to believe in conspiracies. And frankly, I don't think that, barring like a complete redevelopment of our Constitution, we're not going to be adopting European style, let's say like anti-Nazism laws, where you're actually prohibited from advocating for Nazism as an ideology in some parts of Europe. We're not going to have that in the United States. You're allowed to be a dumbass. You're allowed to be a political zealot. You're allowed to be a religious zealot within the United States. So you're saying that, well, why can't?
One moment.
Yeah.
I understand your point, and I think you're making a good one. And I'm gonna follow up with you, and then I'm gonna go to Mr. Riffs on this. I agree. I think that I agree with you that there are a balance in the Republican mind there. But I think you've heard the phrase, war is not a bilateral decision, war is a unilateral decision, right? And what it sounds like you're describing to me is that the Republicans have already accepted the fact that they're at war. And so I'm asking you, what should I be valuing and what should I care about such that Democrats should not be doing the same thing? What am I protecting by showing this level of restraint that you're talking about?
Sure. Well, that's if I'm not strawmanning my opposition, that's where I think the sane tit for tat, the legal, self-defensive, proportional, intelligent tit for tat is probably appropriate. I am not in favor of appeasement and turning the other cheek. Which a question that was asked earlier in this conversation was, what's an alternative to what's an alternative to tit for tat? Well, the alternative is turning the other cheek, right? Where they do something bad and you say, listen, I'm above freaking out, right? But that can be interpreted oftentimes like within the Christian moral framework. What that's supposed to do is that's supposed to shock your opponent, where your opponent is shocked by your restraint in reference to their offense against you, and they start questioning their own moral system. However, I've seen no willingness from the Republicans to do something shocking like January 6, 2021, to have the country proverbially turn the other cheek in reference to not indicting Donald Trump for his attempted insurrection, and then them to go, wow, that was really scary. We almost fucked up the Republic of the United States, and the Democrats gave us a pass. Let's wake up morally and behave better. That didn't happen. And so for me, the intelligent tit for tat actually makes sense. But again, legal, defensive, sane, proportional, which once again, I know Reason is advocating for. I would argue other people are not.
Well, but I think we've come into a little bit of an area where we might find disagreement. Mr. Riffs, I think that you would say that there have been times where that turning of the other cheek has happened, where you would say, look, the Democrats turn their cheek here. Do you feel that way?
Firstly, let me be clear. We're now talking about the implementation of tit for tat. And by that very nature, we seem to have come to an agreement that tit for tat can be a viable strategy, and not even just a viable strategy. Connor's argument there was against appeasement, and that maybe it's time to stop, and how appeasement has failed. I mean, I couldn't argue for tit for tat better than Connor's just done. So, in terms of the debate about tit for tat now, it's more about the implementation than it is about the strategy itself.
Well, and by the way, I'm not trying to jump ahead, but effectively, like, I have no problem going through the line of questioning. I have no problem answering the questions, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think what we're talking about now effectively is that I had the autistic definition, which realistically I think somebody identified. It's eye for an eye. It's actually arguably not tit for tat. But unfortunately, I think that outside of this room of sane gentlemen, tit for tat is synonymous with eye for an eye, and people are really bad advocates for the tit for tat, the sane tit for tat line of political prosecution that Reason Riffs has been
I mean,
arguing.
I'm going to object on
That's
that on
where the
speculation.
confusion
So that is speculative. The fact that people aren't necessarily fully understanding what tit for tat can mean in practice is a reflection of their own ignorance, not the strategy itself. And I actually don't think the people that are worthless. I mean, we're trying to communicate with other Democrats, other people on the center left. We're not trying to communicate with the wildest ones out there. And I get the impression actually Democrats are using tit for tat right now, but going any further in that route is speculative. But
I'm going to let the line of questioning
One second.
proceed. I would say
Yeah.
Stephen is unfortunately somebody who I would not see as a good advocate of what you're arguing for.
Well, okay, we can explore that in 1 second, but I will say, I think that, Ms. Riffs, I understand your position in that, like, it seems like we're getting to a point where we have an answer to our original question for this debate. And as is common, whenever we come into this room of gentle people, we're able to actually get to it very quickly. It's happened before, and it's probably going to happen in the future. That's kind of the point of this kind of structure, is to allow us to have that kind of understanding. However, the other side of it is to then say, okay, great, we got to the answer to the first question. Let's dig a little deeper. And that's what I'm trying to do here with you. I think Connor did bring up a good question before, a good position before, that I think that you will disagree with, is that he thinks that the Democrats have not provided a turn the other cheek, a wake up moment for the Republicans. And I'm asking you, do you think one of those existed in the past? And if not, that's fine. But I'm just asking, do you think there was a wake up moment that the Democrats gave the Republicans?
look, I'm not going to be too hard on the Democrats, because hindsight it's much easier to see this kind of behavior, right? But I think, forgive my ignorance as to the history of the recent history of US political history. I think it was after McCain stood for president. Basically, the Republican Party's been hijacked somewhere after that. McCain was a wonderful individual and potentially a good president, the last good president that the Republicans could have put forward or have put forward. I think ever since then, you've had this behavior on the part of the Republicans of trying to put a spanner in the works of everything good that the Democrats try and do, even if it's in line with their policy positions. And so you've had this non-cooperation after another. And there are examples of government shutdowns that the Republicans have pushed forward in the past, and the Democrats didn't take that as an act of non-cooperation, and then start to take a small risk in the short term by looking for ways and avenues to change the system to make it even harder for Republicans to do that again in the future, and say and communicate, we're going to do that if you keep doing this. And Republicans in the past have done that multiple times. So I think historically they have Democrats. And I think Democrats have appeased on far too many occasions in the past. But in hindsight, including under Biden, by the way.
I think no, and that's fair. And I think that you actually brought something up earlier that I should have jumped on. We're going to bring it in here. You talked about a self-victimization complex, and I think that fits what we're talking about right now, Connor. Whenever you're talking about this turning the other cheek, where I think, and as you said, they're using whatever they can to make things reciprocal. So I struggle to think of a way in which we could have the Democrats turn the other cheek, and the Republicans would not self-victimize in a way and create something so that actually, no, they didn't turn the other cheek. This was reciprocal, or we should be doing it, do you think we're in that kind of environment right now? And if so, do you think then that's why turning the other cheek might not be the strategy we should be using right now?
Yeah, so I think that it might have been a mistake. Just to clarify my argument in reference to January 6, 2021, turning the other cheek probably was a mistake. So I can understand the sanity of the moment and the adults in the room's hesitation to do tit for tat. So as tit for tat, just to be clear, John Eastman, a lawyer, wrote a political scheme in which the vice president's role over counting electoral votes was not ceremonial. Mike Pence could arbitrarily throw out the vote, and he could kick it back to the states, who would have to recertify their elections, a power that he doesn't really have. And then they even argued that even if he doesn't have the power, he should just do it and we should fight it out in court. And here's 3 ways that we can win. Number one was declaring Donald Trump the unilateral victor. The other one was to kick it to the House of Representatives, which I think the Republicans had a majority at the time, so Trump would win that way. And then the final way, I think, was to get it in front of a court somehow. And at that point, I think they were just trying to like play out the time so there would be enough confusion around the situation that eventually the courts might just hand Trump the presidency. And that was the Eastman memo. So in reference to that, as far as I can understand, that is effectively an attempt to overthrow the Republic of the United States through lying. That's what it was. It was lying. And they whipped up a protest and a mob in order to do that. Well, all those people, in my opinion, not only did they commit crimes, they're deserving of punishment for those crimes. But because it was such a crazy moment and because Donald Trump was so powerful within the Republican caucus, they were not able to get enough people to impeach and indict Trump or his co-conspirators. They just didn't. And so they let it slide. But as a result of letting it slide, that emboldened the Trump campaign. And I forget who the speaker was at the time, but the whoever the head of the Republican Party in the House of Representatives was at the time, he was at Mar-a-Lago within 2 weeks after they were considering indicting Trump, and he was embracing Trump. And that effectively normalized it within the Republican caucus. Oh, shit. Even though Trump just got lost, got kicked out of power, and tried to overthrow the Republic, he's still a power broker within the Republican Party. We still have to make peace with the MAGA movement. So sorry for being long-winded, but the reason why I'm trying to describe this in accurate detail is because, in my opinion, Congress, Democrats, Republicans of good faith turned the other cheek, hoping that the American people would wake up, and they failed to do so. So once you turn the other cheek and your enemy strikes you again, at that point, it's probably time for legal defensive reciprocity.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that response. I think I see where you're coming from on this. Now let's go ahead and focus on Destiny's statements because those will come up quite a bit. We're going to focus on that a little bit. And I want to ask Mr. Points, do you think that Destiny's statements about tit-for-tat, do you think he's coming from a place of cooperation, or do you think Destiny's advocacy is more about the reciprocity, about causing harm and getting back at the Republicans? Do you see it as Destiny wanting to return to a state of cooperation, or him just trying to find a way to hurt Republicans?
Honestly, my answer to this, I'll keep it short. He wants revenge. He
Okay.
wants revenge.
Okay. Mr. Riffs, do you have an opinion about that? Do you think Destiny, while he's advocating something akin to
Well, if you're going to invite speculation, then I might as well answer to that. So I think we wouldn't be debating this right now if Destiny hadn't said what he said.
Well, sure. I'm not sure. No, but I'm saying, do you think that Destiny truly wants cooperation and he wants this as a base of cooperation? Or
I think 99
a strategy that lets him hurt.
90. All right. I don't think that there's necessarily an intent behind some of these actions. I think they're very effective in getting us and probably the Democratic Party, or at least some Democratic politicians, to talk about this stuff. And then I've seen it again and again. It's a strategy he seems to have, whether it's intentional or not. He says something wild and ambiguous. He gets 20% more people watching his stream. And then he makes sure it's ambiguous enough that he hasn't actually said anything terrible. And then he pulls it back a little bit and then goes to the sensible point. And that seems to involve a level of control that if someone was really vengeful, I think he would have said something that was not ambiguous, that was just atrocious. But he hasn't actually done. He's incredibly clever. I must be, if that's his intent.
I can respect that. But what I will say though is I'm bringing this back to what Counterpoints was talking about earlier around populism, where I think I probably agree with you that I think that Destiny is being a little cheeky with his language and maybe a little provocative because he likes to go on Piers Morgan. But I think there's a good amount of populist sentiment out there, and I'm worried about it. And people see this strategy and they don't hear the cooperative part. They hear, we have a moral justification to reciprocate.
Yeah, but that's one point that Destiny's made himself very coherently. And whether that's true, I'll leave that to the academics to study it. But he's not a Democrat politician. It's what the Democrat politicians say in that regard. If I saw Newsom speaking the way Destiny's spoken, I would have a problem with that. But as a political pundit whose role is a little different here, I mean, he's had some positive influences. He's got us talking about this today. maybe even, I don't know what was happening behind closed doors in the Democratic Party, but I hope they're listening to the fact they need to take a little bit more risk in the short term to lower the risk in the longer term. And if it's helped that discussion, then he's had a positive influence. What he's actually said in the short term will be forgotten.
Can I add? I gave Steven multiple outs last night. Okay, so what I said probably about halfway through, because his position was so extreme, and I'll remind people of the position.
Mm-hmm.
Steven's position was that even people who did not participate in January 6, 2021, if they are a Republican who supported the Trump administration or the MAGA agenda in any way, they should be charged with insurrection. And even if they're not criminally convicted, they should be deemed insurrectionists legally, so they could be barred from participating in politics. And what I
We do a
said,
declaratory judgment, like a civil declaratory judgment, saying that these people participated in insurrection.
right. And or if they participated with the second Trump administration, they were aiding and abetting an insurrectionist, and therefore they were deserving of being barred from political power. And so what he's really talking about is he's talking about a quarter of the representatives of the United States, and I would say half of the Republican Party easily, maybe 2/3 of the Republican Party, being barred from holding future office as insurrectionists. And what I said to him, probably, I don't know, a quarter of the way through the debate, I was like, number one, you've staked out an absurd position, hoping that everybody will crawl towards you looking for rationalism, because that's what Prime Kai and Staxiums were trying to do. They were trying to find the steel man in the hyperbolic statement. They were trying to find the negotiation in the hyperbolic statement. And then I said, and then of course the famous quote about Donald Trump is, "Don't take him literally, take him seriously," meaning that whatever position he has, the words around the position are not what matters. What matters is that he's staking out an emotional position in this approximate quadrant of policy. And so you need to move towards him, or else he's going to try to fuck you up. And so that's what I kind of said about Steven. He was like, no. Take me seriously and take me literally. And then at that point, I was like, okay, you're being a fucking lunatic. That's what happened last night.
Okay, I mean, I wasn't there, to be fair, and so it's a little bit difficult to really reply to that. But
let's put on the record real quick. Let's put on the record. Wick was there being really soy as well. But go ahead.
Okay, I mean, one thing I would say is I think again, it takes a bit of imagination. I think both Connor and I have demonstrated an imagination about how this kind of level of, should we say, non-cooperation as a reciprocal action to the Republicans could be employed. And I think if there's a continued denial of January 6th, that's effectively like a continuation of the insurrection, of pushing for the illegitimacy of the US system in which you hold dear. And therefore, if any politician is suggesting that, I think there is space for some kind of new law developed in the United States that is easily applied. So, of course, in the end, it's about, you've got to be able to prove it beyond reasonable doubt in a court of law. So, I mean, maybe it's 25% of Republican politicians theoretically could be held account, but then you need the evidence there. So it's going to be a far smaller percentage that effectively you could prosecute with such a law. But I think there's definitely space for that, because if you continue to say that the elections were null and void, you're saying that the current system is null and void because of all the presidents you've had since then. So I think there's space for some creativity there in terms of pushing and taking a little risk in just how threatening it is in terms of action, what the Democrats could put forward. But the rhetorics behind that shouldn't be too aggressive or victorious. It should be really pushing towards the actual action of deterrence through making it completely illegal to denounce an election with no evidence whatsoever. It's insane. You're then bringing into disrepute. It's crazy.
So my frustration with this, though, and this is where some of my conservative and Republican bona fides, I think, are going to come out, is that the procedure matters. And so when you say, and maybe I misunderstood you just here, but I think Stephen effectively said it, the reason why that you would consider anybody who participated in the second Trump government as somebody who aided and abetted an insurrectionist is that we largely know the facts surrounding the January 6, 2021, that they did not substantiate their fraud claims. They did not find outcome determinative fraud. They made these statements. They've been sued. I mean, Dominion sued Fox News for $750 million, and I think they won. And then not just that, the people in New York sued Rudy Giuliani, and I think they won a $150 million lawsuit for defamation for the people who counted votes in Georgia. And it seems like the Republicans have omitted intentionally facts that are inconvenient to the stolen election narrative, and they propagandize their base to believe that that the 2020 election was stolen. And so what's happened though is that procedure has to be followed through. And what I mean by that is those people, you can't just say that in public, declare them insurrectionists, and say that the past 4 years were null and void. Because effectively, if you don't go through the process of proving this in a court of law and convicting these people, then you don't have the authority of the state behind these statements. And all of your statements of invalidation, the Republicans are going to mirror. Now, you could argue the Republicans are already mirroring it by, for instance, the auto pen with Biden. That's them undermining the previous administration. I think they undermined it with Obama as well, where they said like he didn't have the authority to negotiate the Iran nuclear deal or some shit. I forget.
Well, they question his birth, so I mean, they're already legitimacy's question there, right?
You can say they're already there, but that's where I wouldn't see that as Democrats making a sober tit for tat reciprocal legal move.
No, what I'm sorry, I'm being misunderstood. What I'm stating is that you could put a law in place that if you continue to deny that that the election of Biden was legitimate, if you continue to question Obama's birth without any evidence, this factual base of putting forward a view, and I mean in the public sphere, really in a public way, not between your friends around a beer, having a beer, but I mean really actually. And it's also, this goes on to another point we haven't discussed, by the way, is the right-wing media, and whether anything whether they should be taken responsible for the mess that's in the US right now.
But one second, Mr. Riffs, I'm going to give you a second to respond, but real quick, I think we were mostly all moving away from kind of the original point. I think we got through our stuff. How about this? We've still got some time on the clock. Do you guys want to do? Can we do? I'm going to let you finish, Mr. Riffs. If y'all want to do some quick closing statements, if you feel like you need them. We can do our last amicus brief, and then I can close us out. And if y'all want to keep talking, I'm going to let y'all do it. I have to get back to work, but I'll let y'all keep doing that after this. But Mr. Rich, go ahead and finish out what you got, and then we can let's go ahead and finish out. Maybe you do a closing argument, and then Mr. Points, you can do your closing argument, and we'll get the amicus brief.
Well, I appreciate the good faith debate that we've had this evening, midday, whatever time zone you're in. And I feel quite convinced that actually we're both on the same page in terms of the tit-for-tat strategy. The implementation is always going to be the harder point. And it's also been quite clear that Democrats haven't utilized such an effective strategy in the past. And frankly, too much appeasement, I think, regarding January 6th has taken place. And it's led to the bigger risk that's facing the US right now. I would say in regards to Destiny's statements, I don't agree 100% necessarily with his wording and everything he says, but it's also about intent, and being provocative sometimes is quite effective. And I'm appreciative that his provocativeness has led to this discussion today, which I think we can both agree may not have happened if he hadn't have been so, right? So, yeah, in terms of discussing and speculating his intent, that's another thing. And yeah, okay, maybe he goes a little bit too far sometimes, but it's perhaps better to go too far sometimes and not go far enough on other times. And I think he's overall a good force for political discussion, pragmatism, right, which is really quite a rare thing in politics today, to listen to views across the political spectrum, of the reasonable part of the spectrum. And so I really do appreciate him and his influence for that. Even if we disagree with him, maybe it's even 10% or less of the time. So I thank the court for hearing this case today, and hope my point about tit for tat being a reasonable strategy has been vindicated.
Thank you. Then Mr. Points, let's go ahead and hear your closing statement.
Yeah, if I was a memeing asshole, I'd be like, my opponent sucks. He sucks ass. His arguments are dog shit. Fuck that. Like, I'd be a dick.
It's in the record.
I think what we've successfully done through, and I do like this, by the way. I really like the way that it was formulated, and it wasn't as blood sports is awesome. Blood sports is fun, but it's not always productive. And what I would say is, I don't know if we would have arrived at. There's a differentiation between tit for tat and eye for an eye. I don't know if we would have arrived at that if we had taken a blood sports approach. So just to reiterate my case, though. I think that Steven has been ambiguous in the way that he's communicated tit for tat. I also think that through some of his hyperbolic language and also through some of his proposed solutions, they're not as well considered as the solutions that we've considered here. As a result, it seems like they're motivated by vengeance rather than political pragmatism or actual effectiveness. And that hyperbole obviously sparked a conversation, which again, Steven is very good at. However, I think that the caveats that my opponent has drawn out are the necessary caveats that I would need in order to sign on to a tit for tat strategy. As an example, using legal, defensive, moral means in order to impose consequences on your political opponent, unless society has totally collapsed. That's an important caveat that I don't often hear articulated. There was another thing too that was like super important for tit for tat. The reciprocity, the minimum reciprocity between 5 or 10%, where you are, I forget the word that you use, but effectively you're not reciprocal a majority of the time in order to try to mirror your opponent.
Can I just clarify? I just need to clarify some terminology because you've said it a few times now, and it's just a lingo thing. But you mean to cooperate? Reciprocate means you just copy what the other person does. It's literally what tit for tat. But you mean that 5-10% of the time you just cooperate even if the other person isn't cooperated. That's what you mean.
Right. Sorry. Reciprocate can mean negative and positive.
Yeah.
Right. So so you cooperate 5 to 10% of the time. That way, there's an opening for you guys to build a collaborative relationship that hopefully restores some level of social trust and re-energizes the society. Those are important caveats that I had not heard articulated prior to this conversation. And so as a result, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth should be used very rarely. Tit for tat with these important caveats should probably come after turning the other cheek a couple of times, but then you can't turn the other cheek in perpetuity, because if you turn the other cheek in perpetuity, it's just appeasement and you're rewarding your enemies. And that's kind of how I feel about the overview of the discussion that we've had today.
There's another clarification with regards to tit for tat that I didn't make at the beginning, but the first move you always make is to cooperate with regards to tit for tat. So there's also an ambiguity there as to what the first move is. So if you want to look in terms of the election of Trump, part 2, the first move could have been at the beginning of the year when there was also a possibility for a lockdown, and they said, shutdown, sorry. And they said, no, we won't shut down, right? And Schumer was kind of damned for doing that. But maybe that could be seen as, okay, we're going to cooperate on the first move. And so they're using these opportunities for shutdowns as the turns of the game, shall we say. So that's also in accordance with tit for tat, is to cooperate at first to make sure that it's clear that you're willing to cooperate, and then you begin the reciprocal behavior thereafter.
Okay. Well, here. Bailiff, let's go ahead and get that last amicus brief in. Let's get some questions, and then I'll give a ruling. And then if we want to keep talking, we can.
All right. You want to do questions?
Yeah, sure.
All right. We got quite a few questions from our chats in our amicus brief. First question, lighthearted one. This will be asked to everybody, but the question was directed towards Connor. Connor, Mr. Points, do you like your toast light, medium, or burnt?
Weirdly enough, I like all of them. If I'm choosing, I'm probably going light. But every now and then, man, just like some burnt shit where you can like taste the charcoal, that hits too.
Okay, understood. Mr. Riffs?
I don't want it to be charcoal, but it is nice when there's that little bit of an edge to it, especially with a bacon sandwich or something like this. So, medium done, yeah.
Your Honor, your answer?
I'm a light toast man. I can eat all the toast. I'm fine with it. But yeah, if I'm making it, it's gonna be a light toast. I like it to still have a little soft kind of bite to it, just with a crisp on the outside.
For myself as well, I do like medium to light. I need it to be a little squishy.
So just to clarify, okay. We're all moderates in regards to toast as well, then.
Yeah, no extremists here.
Yeah. No extreme. Next question is from I Have Eaten the last question was from Tropic. Next question is from I Have Eaten Foliage. This question is for Reason Riffs. Can you expand on tit for tat and its value, even if the opponent doesn't learn their lesson? Performance versus appeasement under those conditions.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually an interesting point because on the theoretical side, when they look at the effectiveness of tit for tat, it's against other players with randomly generated strategies, right? Whereas in practice, you have to kind of gauge the strategy of your opponent. So in the end, if your opponent's always going to not cooperate, I mean, you can see what's happening now in the American context, but historically in other cases, I mean, okay, you can go back to Hitler. It doesn't really matter if the other side it just completely appeases. It's going to become terrible in the end. So it's also about the nature of your opponent. But in the end, by having tit for tat, it's so damaging to them. It's just no longer interesting to not cooperate. So they have to be an incredibly irrational player to persist with that. So tit for tat really makes it worthwhile for them to cooperate, however selfish they are. And so you're making selfishness a good thing in that regard. And it's a very effective.
Great answer. All right. Thank you. Next question is from I Am Ivory. This question is to Connor. It's quite an inflammatory one, maybe. Should Republicans just have to make peace with the communists and socialists in the party? MAGA is a cancer in the Republican Party. Democrats aren't okay with the communists in the party, but you want us to be okay with MAGA? Is that true, Connor? You want us to be okay with MAGA?
No. I want you to be okay with hopefully the post MAGA consensus. And I brought this up last night, and I understand it's a little bit idealistic. It's a little overly vague, but I still want people to seriously consider it. I think that what is pushing radicalism in the United States is wealth inequality, rapid demographic change, existential technological shifts, and the dissolution of the social fabric. I think if you think about those 4 reasons, they can kind of be tied to like the vast majority of problems that people bitch about on the internet almost every single day. And so effectively, like what's going to happen is those are the things that motivated the radicalism of Trump. Those are the things that, in my opinion, are motivating people to pursue socialism and communism. And so if we want to keep a liberal republic with mixed economy capitalism, and we're serious about that prospect, we have to start addressing those issues. And so once Trump's gone, hopefully there is not another cult leader that can take his place. That alliance is going to fracture. And then if you want those people to become a part of your political movement, you're going to have actual solutions for those people, or at least speak to those issues. Donald Trump doesn't have real solutions to these problems. He just speaks to these issues. But at minimum, you're going to have to speak to these issues. At maximum, you're going to have solutions.
Okay, my own question, is that cope? It could be. Reason, what do you have?
I'm kind of shocked by Connor's response because of how much I like it. And it wouldn't be fair for me to say this somewhat behind his back without saying it to his face. But sometimes you really do sound like a Democrat in Republicans' clothing. You're talking about wage inequality as a cause of the strife in America, and not just in America. You look at statistically across the Western world, or the decoupling of wage growth from GDP growth, and but I think an even more important factor is this discrepancy between the poorest and the richest, right? So I think in America, it was taken from 1970s, the minimum wage, the spending power today of the minimum wage is 73% of the minimum wage in one of the years in the 70s. Forgive me for forgetting that statistic. So you can see that the people on the minimum wage, their spending power is now 73%, but the average wage has increased, almost doubled. So that means that they're competing against the middle class that's got more than 200% of their spending power. And that kind of dictates what people have, right? Whether it be mobile phones and laptops and such like. It's hard if you're on that end of the spectrum. And you don't see that from just looking at the average wage. So if you say, oh, look at the mean wage, yeah, but that's not looking at the distribution. So the fact that you brought up this point is a really, really important one. And I also agree that I think it's fueling the far left as a simplistic solution. Ironically, like the right have simplistic solutions around, getting rid of migrants. The left have simplistic solutions by putting billionaires in prison, right? And so both of these extremes are being fueled, and I think this is an example of the course, but I really feel like you're a part of the center left when you say that, and I'd love to welcome you there. or here. But
Well, if you guys want me on the center left, you're going to have to become a little bit more racist, and you're going to have to like guns more. But just addressing.
hey, I love guns. I'm kind of happy in Europe that it's a bit hard to get hold of them. But the first thing I'd do if I went to the States would be to go to a gun range with you guys. It looks damn
if you're
fun.
in Orlando, hit me up. But addressing this though, I think that if you look at the right wing, so even if you're talking about Fuentes or you're talking about Trump, they've used economic populism with which to bolster their populism. And I think that conservatives and Republicans so the Republican project, or at least the philosophy as I've been explained it, is that we believe that like the elites or whatever, we should elect the best amongst us to craft technocratically competent policy that makes a healthy, happy, thriving republic. That's at least the idea behind republicanism. And by the way, like republicanism, actually, like the Irish Republicans, I'm pretty sure are socialist, right? They believe in a republic, but their economics are socialist. So actually, economics can be a broad array within Republican philosophy. But I agree with you that historically, especially in the United States, the Republicans are typically more laissez-faire economics. However, I think we can all recognize that there's an imbalance, that the laissez-faire, neoliberal, and neoconservative economics of the past 50 years have created a underclass within America, a working class underclass. The underclass is pissed, and they're turning to political radicalism in order to try to solve their problems. And so my options are make sure that the working class have a dignified life, which is probably a moral good anyways, or it's allow the underclass to continue to suffer and then either turn to fascism or communism in order to alleviate their suffering. So for me, if it's providing working class people a dignified life, I would rather do that than fall into a fascist or communist society.
So just to clarify, Connor, because you started to answer a question I had for you. So are you saying that in hindsight that our system, and I'm not even saying whether Democrats or Republicans, and it's the same in Europe, that in some respects, for example, some levels of, it could be market control or the cost of living, for example, that there could have been a little bit more state intervention to kind of address the lowest ebb of poverty? In hindsight, I mean.
Weirdly enough, I think it's needed now. So just as an example, the 2008 financial crisis was spurred on by housing development being subsidized by the government. I would argue that we need that now, even if it creates a new bubble and implodes. Like we need state intervention in the economy in order to what is it? Socialism. Okay. So I've done a lot of studying of a lot of political philosophies. I'll try to keep this brief. Socialism, the moral predicate of socialism is they're trying to alleviate the oppressions of capitalism. That's like, if you look at pre-Marxian socialism, that's what they're trying to do. Okay. So if you, as a capitalist who believes in entrepreneurship, private property, property rights, all that kind of stuff, if you believe in capitalism generally, you can't let the oppressions of capitalism become so grievous that the population turns to socialism or fascism in order to escape the oppressions of socialism, or excuse me, the oppressions of capitalism. So it's actually like, again, trying to be brief, it's like the communist statement of like, the capitalists will sell us the last rope with which we will hang him. And that's what I feel like American capitalists are right now, where they've gutted the social safety net so aggressively. They've allowed the working class to immiserate so badly that anyone who just thinks that tax cuts and deregulation are going to solve our problems, they're effectively coping.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Before you respond, let me come in here real quick. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. And if we have more questions or more discussion to do after that, that's totally fine. But I have a whole lot of billing and lawyer work to go do. Hard out at 2. So at 1. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out. So I'm going to first thank everybody for coming. Parties, both of y'all did a great job today, keeping it civil, and that really helped us get to kind of the root of the question. I think that for me, I think that tit for tat is a strategy that can be useful politically, and I think that both sides are going to be in agreement and happy to say that. I think that what we came to and kind of the caveats you made here really make it so that we can understand what tit for tat means, what it doesn't mean, and why it should be used effectively in our current political environment. That being said, everybody in the chat, thank you for your questions and watching with us. This is our third episode of this, and we've really enjoyed doing it. Zip and I are really trying hard to find a way to get our schedules to where we can make this a more regular thing, and trying to find more people to come on and do it. So we don't need you to be big and famous like Counterpoints here. You can be just a chatter. If you find somebody that you think would be fun to have a debate with, that would be a good time for you to come on and have this back and forth. Bring them to us. We don't mind. We'd love to bring some people on. And even if it's a smaller idea or maybe not as big and important. I am going to do some quick plugs real quick. Everybody go and read the Pragmatic Papers. We got some great stuff out there. We'd really love it if you came by. Me and Reason Riffs both are pretty regular contributors to it. And it's really just a good way for DGG to stay informed.
I actually wrote about game theory in my last article, and that was published yesterday. So,
we have a new volume out, and Reason Riff's most recent article actually addresses some of the things we discussed here today. So that actually be a good follow-up, maybe kind of fill in some holes if you had any. I'm also gonna shout out to let's see. I've been asked to shout out the Bunker and to the Gilmore and Gondam, if I'm saying that name right, podcast. They asked me to shout that out so that you guys can go and listen. They actually put out some good stuff from time to time. They have some pretty cool interviews and discussions. So I recommend you'll go listen to that. With that, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the courts. Y'all, that does not mean that it has to end now. It just means that I'm leaving to go change out of this robe. So again, everybody, y'all have a great day. Connor, it was great to meet you.
Pleasure.
Reason Riffs, it was great to see you again. And Zip, when we're forced to work together like this, I can stand it. So, hopefully for a little while. But yeah, you'll have a great one.
And Kafka, a big thanks to you, man, for being a fair judge and.
Easy for you to say.
But I'm sure you'll blast me later for what I've said, but.
Yeah.
You'll have a good one. Bye bye.
Take care, man.
See you, bud.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll just
What a guy.
I'll hang out for a second if you guys want. Sure. All I was gonna say though is like the same way that people have said, like, so for instance, Nancy Pelosi got a lot of shit for saying like, oh, we need like a strong, sane right wing for a healthy American society, and I do view conservatism. So like I've read a biography about Burke. Burkean conservatism, as far as I understand it, is effectively like a reaction to the French Revolution, where effectively what happened was the rigid traditionalists who were supporting the French monarchy and supporting the church were so brittle and so resistant to reform that they effectively radicalized a zealous base, and that radicalized left wing is what ushered in the Reign of Terror. And so Edmund Burke saw that and he was like, damn, that's super fucked up. I don't want the monarchy and the current government in England to get overthrown. So as a result, we need to figure out a new system. And I don't know if he ever even called it conservatism. I don't even know if he ever named it. But he effectively, at least the way that I've heard it interpreted by the book, is that it's like, it is the job of a conservative to presume the status quo, to presume institutions, because institutions and the status quo were not built in a moment. They were built over centuries or millennia of tradition. However, progressives and liberals, people who are emphatic on justice and freedom, they will have criticisms of the establishment. It's the role of the conservative to needle, critique, and question these reform suggestions. That way, the bad ones die and the good ones rise to the top, and then the good ideas are implemented incrementally. And so some people have said that conservatism, what has conservatism conserved? And also conservatism is just progressivism doing the speed limit. I don't view those as insults. I actually think that's like almost an accurate description of Burke.
It's in the term, you conserve versus the progressive who's trying to progress, and it'll naturally be an adversarial thing. Even if you are progressing, the conservatives, trying to conserve it and just limiting whatever progress wants to be made.
I mean, of course, that only works if there's a respect across the aisle, right? That people are actually listening to each other's arguments, and it's not just a shout fest that a lot of our political systems have become. And of course, the big Republican elephant in the room is the right-wing media, and it's just trampling all over our ability to have that reasonable discussion. It's fueling this polarization, this hatred towards politicians, and I think a lot of politicians have a lot of blame. And okay, the MAGA politicians are crazy, but in generally blaming all politicians are all the same. This mentality, their lives are under this crazy magnifying glass, and then they're just burnt by the sun because the media just takes some joy in it, and it creates controversy. So I think we need a little bit more respect across the aisle in that regard for it to work. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
As somebody who's working in alt media, there's a perverse incentive, obviously, to be sensational and to have the hot takes. I think it's why Steven's successful. I think why Nick Fuentes is successful. I think it's why Hassan Piker is successful to a degree. And
Sure.
I do see the perverse incentive for the media, where particularly if you have a sensational program, everybody's like Pierce Morgan, people are going to be like, oh, you had Andrew Tate on, you're a fucking piece of shit. But guess what the views are going to say? The views are going to say 2 million views, freaking $20,000 in ad revenue in 24 hours. That's what, so realistically, even with my chat, there's a perverse incentive to piss off my chat. Sometimes they complain. They're like, God, please no, I don't want to watch this content. This guy sucks. He's infuriating. He's a piece of shit. But you know what happens statistically? Chat is popping off. Super chats are rolling in because they're so mad. They love to hate the thing that they're looking at.
I know it's disappointing. We didn't disagree enough today. I mean, but I mean,
about immigration sometime. So but
we can talk about immigration. Let's go for it.
but I did want to hit this real quick. So I think that in our current political moment, there were things that set off the right wing that maybe they don't want to admit. And what I would say is, I don't think the reaction to Obama matched Obama as a president. I don't think that the counter reaction to Obama actually matches. We passed the Affordable Care Act. That doesn't make sense to me. And then same thing with trans people, trans kids, trans rights, trans this, trans that. I also don't think the political backlash meets the political moment of what's actually happening. But it seems like there's a lot of energy contained and resentment within the right wing, where effectively having a black president, cool that we had a black president, but realistically, I don't know if the country was ready for that. And then also the conversation around trans stuff, I don't know if the country was ready for that. And so I think that's part of the rocket fuel that has fueled the right over the past 5 to 10 years.
What do you mean when you say the country wasn't ready for that? Because Obama won very handily in his elections, right? Unless you're using it in a different way, meaning that the people who didn't vote for him weren't ready for it, or there were people who voted for him that were not actually ready for it, even if they thought they were.
Yeah,
how do you mean that they weren't?
I think it was rocket fuel for Trump, because remember, Trump was like a birther conspiracy theorist. He probably said like Obama was like the worst, weakest president who'd ever ruled, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then you also have to bear in mind within the American electorate that 1/3 votes left, 1/3 votes right, 1/3 doesn't vote at all. And so also Trump allegedly energized a lot of typical non-voters through populist rhetoric. So yeah.
Sure.
I mean, it's a bit paradoxical though, right? Like if Obama was never elected, then it's also about normalizing these things. And I would delineate between, the trans rights, which is a bit more of a complicated hot topic, and just having a black president, which should be just having a black president rather than it being some kind of crazy thing. At some point, you needed to have a black president, otherwise it would just frankly never happen. So it hasn't worked out, and there's a whole host of reasons, but I think it needed to be done, frankly. And I think that in isolation wouldn't have caused Trump. I think there's other things at play, and some of them you've highlighted yourself. So I don't really see that as being, and especially such a gifted orator as Obama.
We were lucky that he was like, I don't even know if he was Ivy League, but we were lucky that he was like Ivy League educated.
Hey, the whole world envied America for that leader. The way he spoke. And if you look, there's a real interesting statistic about the vocabulary use of presidents. And decade by decade, it's been dropping. And then Obama gets into power, and you look at that graph, and it's the big anomaly, the big, beautiful anomaly. And Obama's breadth of the use of the English language, it was poetry sometimes.
Oh boy. And then
Um,
afterwards, what do we get?
Oh, the funny thing though is watching George W. Bush speeches now and George W. Bush interviews, because he was deemed like he was the dumb president. He was the
Yeah.
idiot
They didn't even
fumbling
know.
president. And now you watch him and you're like, holy shit, like this guy's a fucking genius.
yeah,
And it's just because we're used to effectively like, and this is something that I think about too. A lot of I think the average literacy for Americans that have graduated high school is effectively middle school. What, like middle school level vocabulary, middle school level like reading comprehension, middle school level everything. And so when you think about that, like how stupid you were in like 7th or 8th grade, and then you look at American politics, you're like,
Oh.
yeah, like
Yeah.
that makes sense. That makes a
I
lot of
see it
sense.
now.
And actually, there's something for
Yeah.
the Democrats to learn. I mean, there's nothing. You don't lose too much by just using a bit more of a limited vocabulary. If that's the way now to communicate with voters, you're going to have to take that route.
So be it, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, as much as I'd like
Well,
hearing
think about
Obama
it.
speak, it's not necessarily the most effective rhetoric anymore.
Does Trump actually specify policy?
Never.
I don't think he's ever specified policy once. And if he does, he sounds like an
Concepts of the
asshole.
plan, famously.
I think every single Trump speech has been the people who are against me are bad guys. I am a good guy. If you vote for me, awesome things will happen. And if you vote for the other person, it'll be the end of the world. And that's like
Also,
every
immigrants are
fucking
killing everybody.
that's every, and it's like you've been
Yeah.
shafted, the economy's against you, the elites are against you, blah blah blah. It's like grievance politics and it's economic populism. But the whole point is that like I think we're all verbose here. And oftentimes when Democrats get into a debate, they start explaining. And so they have like a 2 to 3 minute like analysis of policy. Whereas realistically, if they had broken that 2 minutes down into, if you vote for me, I have policy good, policy fix this problem. That
Yeah.
would have been
So
better.
obviously the solution is just, give the same information in less words or whatever. But I think the obvious like retort is that the reason that happens is because Democrats have to explain, because Democrats on average are whatever more educated than Republicans. Republicans are operating on a different set of information, so you have to explain what the accurate, correct information is. Because maybe if they had the correct information, they would agree with the conclusion.
Yeah, but that's again, that's like presuming rationalism, and so
exactly.
like,
Yeah.
No, but there's a bit more. There's a bit more to that, though, right? I mean, I think one of the criticisms I would have of politics of the past few decades, it's been far too reactive. But if you're going to be proactive in terms of saying, "Hey, this policy is actually pretty good. We should be on board with this," then you're going to have to some extent explain things. The problem I think the left has had is not explaining it from an economic standpoint, but it's all about vibes and this is the moral thing to do, rather than looking at the economics of things, including on migration, for example. That you're just shooting yourself in the foot often with a lot of these right-wing policies economically, which is going to cost more, and it's going to mean you have worse roads, you have worse schools, you have more crime. And so you should always root it back to this kind of economic argument whilst making it clear. But you are going to have to argue some of these policies, because otherwise you're just reactive to what the polls say. And I think that's been a bigger problem in politics.
I think one of my things though has been integration, and I'm not going to lie. One of my frustrations with liberals, because oftentimes like liberals are about maximal human freedom. Like I use that as a definition. I think it's true. Liberals believe in maximal human freedom. So if I'm going to impose upon somebody else, and I'm going to say, you have to buy into the civic project of the United States of America. You have to buy into the Constitution of the United States. You have to buy into the Declaration of Independence and Bill of Rights. You have to learn English. You have to participate in our economy. You have to do this. You have to do that. All of these duties that I'm forcing upon someone. I've had liberals and progressives who basically be like, oh, that's so crazy of you to impose all these duties on a stranger. If they're not hurting you, who cares? But I think that from a conservative perspective, it's like, well, I don't want to live next to somebody who doesn't consider or care about these duties or responsibilities.
Sure, but do you really think that's
very interesting? You
say that.
No, but do you not think that do you really believe that some of these things have been the cause of the lack of integration of migrants? That the fact that there hasn't been an active actively seeking to improve their English or learn about the culture. Do you think it's because their lack of activity?
I think America is actually really, really, really good at integration. But I think that the objection is not necessarily whether or not most Spanish-speaking people also speak English or Spanglish.
Hmm.
I think it's the lack of intentionality. It feels chaotic. It feels anarchic. And so, as an example, like within public schools, we have like English as a second language classes or whatever.
Hmm.
But then the problem is oftentimes there's like accommodations for education where effectively some people make it through the school system without learning English. And so that's where like the I lived in Belgium as a child.
Oh well.
I
Okay.
I went to a French speaking school.
Hmm.
I
Mm.
had 2 weeks to speak English, and then after that they threw me in the deep end.
So, Connor, where did you live in
And
Brussels?
they were like, "Figure it the fuck out."
You,
Sorry, what was the
you,
question?
you lived in Brussels, or?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
lived
Cool.
in
I also lived in Belgium. I lived in Brugge.
Oh, cool.
En ik heb ook een beetje Vlaams geleerd, but you probably learned French.
I can't speak Flemish for shit.
Yeah, but the point being, I tried to.
Flemish.
Yeah, I didn't know what the fuck that was.
I tried to integrate, you know, and
French.
I integrated quite well. I mean, I had my Belgian girlfriend and speaking Flemish and
But
stuff.
that's what I'm saying though, is that that integrative expectation,
Hmm.
you either rise to it or you don't. And that's where I'm saying like maybe this is like an American centric thing, but effectively like when this is brought up in political circles, it seems like liberals or progressives are hesitant to impose duties on other people, whereas conservatives are like, no, that's necessary for the social cohesion of society, and they resent liberals and progressives lowering the bar of what's socially acceptable.
Okay, let me push back. Let me push back a bit against this, because I actually think, you know, let's both agree that we want, even if America's doing it pretty well, we want more integration, because you can never really have too much integration, I would say, right? But the problem isn't necessarily the intent of the immigrant. It's also about how immigrants are necessarily welcomed into the society, whether it's by the individuals of that society, but also by the institutions. So in a country like Belgium or Germany, you get free German lessons if you're certainly if you're a refugee here, right? And there are classes you go to, the opportunities are given. The other thing is, and this is a really difficult thing, I don't have a solution to this, but I do see it as a problem. So I lived in also the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, and I lived in an area that was predominantly Moroccan and Turkish. I really liked it because they had the best markets, and I'd spent months in Turkey before this. My neighbor was like, wow, you've been to the region of Turkey that I'm from? So I got on really well with the people there. But every time I spoke to Dutch people and mentioned that I lived in this area of Amsterdam, like, isn't it dangerous? And I was having to explain, no, I get on really well with my neighbors, yada, yada, yada. So the point being is, so many people moved out of the area. It wasn't just the people moving in that created the segregation. So it's both sides of the native people that live there, as well as the people coming in. There needs to be some incentive and actually some energy put in to getting people together to understand and learn about each other. But I'm sure maybe I surprise you with this, but I do think that anyone that's coming to our liberal democracies, they better have a basic level of liberalism in them in terms of respecting other people. But from what I see right now, and also, I mean, I was brought up in a really poor area in the UK. I may not sound that way. My parents are pretty well educated. But I was brought up in what's called a council estate, like it's social housing in the UK. And I experienced physical assaults. I've been spat at. I've also lived in other poor areas of the UK. And there's this inverse snobbery among the poorest in the community. And they are not liberal. They do not like me for having long hair, for speaking and pronouncing my T's at the end of the words. And so I learned that the most liberal people that I have ever come across, that they are the native ones. So frankly, I don't really care if it's migrants coming in and they're Islamic, frankly, extremists, if they have a problem with me for being atheist or having a Jewish background or that kind of thing. Or whether it be a bunch of skinheads not liking my long hair. I'm going to be agnostic as to which one I have a problem with, but I have problems with all of that.
But that's ultimately so I view the United States as a liberal or libertarian project. I really do. And what I mean by that is it seems like we've put as a cornerstone of our civic philosophy, like freedom from the government effectively in order to pursue life, liberty, and property, or the pursuit of happiness. And so within that frame, I think that the game works. Okay. Freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, right to self-defense, limited government, limited by these Bill of Rights, etc. The game works as long as everybody subscribes to the game. And the frustrating part for me with MAGA is that they've said, we no longer subscribe to the game. What are you going to do about it? And that's like my frustration with liberals and also progressives, but also to a certain degree the never Trump Republicans in the center right, is that effectively they've been like, well, we'll just keep playing the game and hope that eventually you come around.
Sure.
And that's been the response so far. But that's where I feel like it's really important to starve, because I do think this radicalism is being caused by unaddressed social problems. We have to starve this movement of the fuel that causes it, or else we're fucked. Because people, what it looks like to me, Biden, from a rule of law standpoint and actually following the courts and following the game, he was infinitely better than Trump. And yet, because the economy was anemic, we voted in Trump again. And so as a result, that tells me is that shitloads, literally probably millions, maybe tens of millions of people, they do not care about the game of liberalism if they're doing poor materially. They will vote for any political philosophy or representative as long as it promises them better social material circumstance.
Yeah, that's a priority, is to be able to have good food on the table rather than to have the freedom to speak. And it kind of makes sense, and I think you can tap into understanding that and respecting that. I think Democrats have failed to acknowledge inequality as being so serious, as you have done. And that's why I say I think you voice more center-left policies sometimes than some Democrats have done.
Yeah.
But I do think that the liberalism thing is an issue, and I think you could tackle the bad side of migration when there is this lack of integration, when there isn't the embracing of saying, hey, you can't tell people how to, what religion to believe in or how to look if you come to the United States or you come to Europe. But at the same time, you could say, well, but that's also happening on the far right. They're very similar. This is the irony, right? They should all go and live on an island together where they complain about what God they believe in or whatever they want to complain about, so that the other person should be doing this. Because their problem isn't with what they can do themselves. They make an excuse for that. Their problem is they want to see everyone else doing this.
My favorite quote, or my favorite clip in reference to that, is Louis Theroux doing a interview with a white South African who has lunch with a black South African. And he's like, oh, wait, I thought you were racist. Why do you hang out with that guy? And he's like, oh, because he's racist too.
See, there's an evolution. There's some evolution.
Yeah, they're both ethno-religious, racial tribalists, but because they're both ethno-religious, racial tribalists, they get along.
Yeah. In physics, we call that an unstable equilibrium.
But I'm probably going to go in a minute just because it's getting later in the day, but
Sure.
I'd love to chat again. But my problem though is that, like, so what people assume is, because I think that the working class of America, because dude, I've been working class majority. My parents are the lower part of the upper middle class segment of society. And what I mean by that is there's the professionals, like the doctors, the lawyers, the accountants, the engineers, and they make a few $100,000 a year, and they're able to afford a house, and they can buy their cars, and they can put their kids into good schools. I was raised in the bottom of that social strata. But as a result of being raised in the bottom of that social strata, I got along with, but had beef with the rich kids. And I got along with, but I had beef with the poor kids. And so I was never really in either world. And then coming up under my own economic destiny, because my parents didn't hand anything to me necessarily. They handed me a couple of things, but not that much. Effectively, I've been working class my entire life. I've made less than $100,000 a year almost my entire life. And most of the time I was probably making less than $50,000 a year. That's a tough life. It's a tough life to work 40 to 60 hours a week, pay all of your bills, still be behind on one or two bills by 2 weeks, and then be behind, and then just not be able to pay it. You just have to call the person who is running your cell phone, running your electricity, running your whatever, and you have to say, hey man, like, I'm working my dick off. I'll have money for you in 2 weeks. Please don't shut my shit off. But that is not an isolated incident for the working class of America. That's every single month for years upon years upon years upon years. And so when you live like that, I've probably lived like that arguably my entire adult life, but realistically probably 5 or 10 years. It was really bad. When you live like that for a while, you get so exhausted and so tired, you want any kind of relief from that situation.
Sure.
I'm smart enough that I'm able to escape that lifestyle through my own talents. There are plenty of people who cannot. And I feel for those people because it's not a dignified life. It feels shitty.
And you could
And
get bad luck
those people-
sometimes, and you can have the talents, but just bad luck, right? And if you, and to be frank about it, if I look at the US, you know, if there's not that safety net there, it's not just that you don't end up practically using it; it's knowing that it isn't there, right? And knowing that you're going to be
which is an
potentially
excellent motivator
destitute.
for work.
Yeah, but it's not it's too much stick and not enough carrot, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and to be frank, European countries are very, very diverse. So when I see Germany and I see what poverty is in Germany, and it does exist, but it's so minute in compared to the UK, where this was a statistic from the end of the last Labour administration: 100,000 children in a tiny little island country like Britain in 1 year went without food for a whole day. And that means other days they were getting below what they needed, but there's a whole day where they didn't eat. Children. I just find that a horrific statistic to remind us that it doesn't matter what the average wage is when there's people being left behind at the bottom. I completely agree with you, Connor. I think it's one of the biggest problems we face today, and I think it may be exacerbated. And we need to confront that, and politicians need to start talking about that.
Well, and I would be a libertarian if I thought it was possible. And what I mean by that is, like, libertarians are oftentimes minimalist statists. They just believe in maybe a security apparatus for the state, but realistically, you should make it on your own merits and rise and fall on your own merits. I really would be that kind of person. However, number one, I don't think that everybody has sufficient merit in order to make it in society, and so as a result, you have to account for those people. One option is letting them die in the gutter. The other option is genociding them. Okay, those are both horrific. Those aren't real options. The final option that I think is probably the most humane and the most sensible is creating a sane, moderate welfare state. And I heard somebody refer to welfare as a riot tax. And I think that's a perfectly sane position, which is effectively like, okay, you can't make it on your own merits. You're either not smart enough, you're disabled, you have injury in the family, illness in the family, bad luck, whatever. We'll make sure that you have a roof over your head and you're not going to starve. And as a result of that, don't destroy your surrounding society. But libertarians in the right wing seem to say, no, actually letting them die in the gutter is preferable. And I think they do so at their own peril.
This is really, really funny because I was brought up in a very left-wing household. And my politics were always, I think at some point in my life, I would have called myself a socialist. So I actually joined the Labour Party. I never joined any, crazy left-wing party. But I think at some point I thought ideally we'd live in a socialist utopia. But now in the past 10 years, I've come to realize, that isn't even the ideal. And part of the reason is the ownership model. And also seeing in Germany, how powerful unions can be in a really negative way. So in Germany, we have a lot of staff in the trains. And we have lots of staff in the trains, not because it makes the trains better, but because the unions negotiated that they could stay on working in the trains. You can automate an awful lot on trains. And it's really, really wise to do so because about 40% of the cost of running trains is staff. So if you automate it, you reduce the cost of public transport. That's why trains are so expensive. People think it's a conspiracy. It's not. It's just that on average more expensive to run than planes. And part of the problem is the unions. So if we have this wonderfully unified, this system that's run by a bunch of unions, run by the state, then there is, in certain markets, there's just not going to be the competition. The market I give as an example, because I'm biased towards this, are the gyms in Germany, for example. There's loads of these budget gyms. It's great. And why do they exist? Because of market dynamics, because of competition. They found where they could save the money. And I now pay 25 euros a month and go to an excellent gym with decent equipment. And that was because of capitalism. So in an ideal world, you would also have that. So there is no ideal, kind of crazy free market that effectively is a form of anarchy. So anarchists, in my opinion, are wild capitalists. They just don't realize it. And at the same time, like an entirely state-owned system is so undynamic that you don't get the competition in the right places, that you get decision-making that's so gradual and slow that a snail would outpace them.
That's where, for me, like, I've been in Twitch and YouTube politics for a really long time. I really tried to like understand my opponents even when I hated them. And as far as I know, like Marxian socialism, like I said, socialism in general is trying to emancipate the working class from the oppressions of capitalism. As at least that's how I understood it. And then with Marxist socialism, it's typically the decommodification of basic human needs and workers owning the means of production, food, water, shelter free, and then also you get a stake in whatever productive venture that you're a part of. And so there's market systems, there's vanguard systems, there's estate systems, there's all this different shit. But the reason why that's not ideal to me is kind of similar to what you said. I think that there is something to be said for having a vision as an individual, finding positive collaborators for your vision, taking a risk on that vision, and then letting kind of the creative chaos either take off or implode. And these are the kind of things that like create revolutionary technologies within free societies, but it's also something that can make somebody incredibly wealthy. And so, as somebody who's running like an entrepreneurial venture right now, I'll tell you it's a pain in the ass. I'll also tell you, I don't know if I would say I would rather die than go back to work. This is a lot more fun than work. This is a lot more fun than arguably I could have a less hours, less stress, better benefits being an employee. This is a lot of stress and a lot of hours. It's also a lot of fucking fun. So that's where I think the market needs to leave enough room for entrepreneurs to be able to climb up, create the creative destruction that capitalism is known for. The only time that I'm going to sign on to socialism, decommodification of basic human needs and workers owning the means of production, is if we actually create a like android robot race that almost makes human labor unnecessary for the continued, not even continued survival, for the thriving of society. If we get to that point, then we can decommodify everything and we can get stakes in the productive companies that are left that help subsidize our lives. Then I'm okay with socialism. But that's like, for me, maybe 500 years off, 1,000
So
years
you're
off, even if we're around as a species. Like, so that's
I mean,
socialism.
I will push back.
so you want basically a good government social safety net. It's not too over the line to be towards socialism.
I'm ultimately a centrist,
you
man.
know,
Mixed economy
center
capitalism.
left.
What's
You
the
know,
problem?
Yeah, but the center.
Republicans don't want that. Republicans don't want what you want, but sure.
Yeah, but the centre's a bit relative. So I mean, I think frankly that we're all on the left side of centre right now because the centre's moved rightwards. It's relative to the Overton window, right? But the other thing is just pushing back on like what socialism is described as. There was a founding father of the SPD, the left-wing party in Germany, called Edward Bernstein, and he was kind of particularly disliked by, because I think at the end of Engels' life, Bernstein was starting to publish his work. And he said, oh, no, in the ideal system, it wouldn't be entirely state-owned, not even in the ideal. So kind of along the lines of what I was saying. And he gave birth to a lot of the ideals of left-wing parties in Europe that we see today. And even people like Tony Blair were still calling themselves until quite recently socialist, but he meant this type of socialism. And that was becoming the norm for what people who call themselves socialist believe. And I think more recently, and you see this within Hassan, there's been this sudden explosion of people who believe in a very radical Marxist form of socialism, hijacking that school and hijacking those parties. And it's particularly dangerous in countries like the UK and the US, where effectively you have a two-party system. You don't have proportional representation. We just have to accept that's the way it is. I think, frankly, it's not going to change anytime soon. And that means they're going to be in our own parties. Now, if they're willing to accept some compromise and say, yeah, okay, but we will support the candidate in the end. You know, like Walsh, before the last election, he openly said, I'm voting for Harris. She's the best option. You know, that to me reaches the threshold of okay, I'm going to listen to your, frankly, I find a bit wild ideas that the state is, you know, perfectly or Marxist socialist. But if you're willing to compromise on my views, then I'm willing to listen to yours. Maybe, you know.
My fear, though, my genuine fear is that I've appealed to political pragmatism in the past. I've appealed to political pragmatism for my own vote for Harris. That the threat to the Republic was so overwhelming that I will go with somebody that I have objections to their policy on, just because the Republic is more important than my policy objections. Now, that being said, I think that the right wing did that with the Christian nationalists, with the far right, with the dissident right, with the Proud Boys, with all these dissident organizations. And what would happen is when anybody called out how extreme they were like, oh yeah, but they're such a small fragment. They're so online. Nobody listens to them. They're not that big of a deal. And so I'm not saying that you guys can't maybe correctly use similar excuses for Hassan or maybe for Mamdani. And whenever those people get in public, they effectively advocate for social democratic policies. Very rarely are they like, we need to decommodify basic human needs and workers need to own the means of production and we need to kill landlords. Very rarely in public will they say something like that. But I do think that they're probably incrementalists where they know that you would probably need people to get used to social democracy before they start considering more radical socialism. And that's where, for me, it's like a Trojan horse.
Yeah, but I'm not arguing for Hassan here. His rare moment of honesty, he's even admitted to that. So, I mean, forget Hassan. He did not even say that he was going to vote for Harris. He did not even push for that. That's what I'm saying is just that borderline difference where before the last election, Walsh did say, sorry, his name is so German, I find it hard to pronounce it in an English way. He said, well, Harris is the better choice here. We should vote for Harris, or I'm voting for Harris. Hassan was ambiguous. It's only afterwards he said, "Oh yeah, I think I, basically voted for her."
Yeah, no,
I can't trust anything he says.
I saw a clip where he said, "I'm not going to tell you who I voted for."
Yeah.
Which sounds like a Jill Stein.
I'm not going to tell you who to vote for.
And let's be clear: the majority of people are never going to vote for Trump. So if most people vote, Trump can never win. The reason he wins is just about as much about the people who don't vote as the people who vote for him. And so if you create an apathy like Hassan's been doing, it's just as cancerous as Trump himself. And you can never really trust him again after this.
Then to me, the objection to Hassan and to whoever who is similar to Hassan, the objection isn't, oh, their ideology is terrible. It's, they're not politically pragmatic. And I'm not gonna lie, that does rub me like we're just getting to know each other. So I'm not saying that, but like Pisco, I consider to be like a pretty rational dude. Overall, like he plays footsie with progressives too much. Maybe he gets like backed into an argumentative corner and he fights a little bit too aggressively. But overall, like I think he's an intelligent guy who's capable of like some pretty decent insight. So when I'm bringing up these like anxieties and fears and he's like, oh, it's not a big deal. They're not going to infiltrate us. We'll infiltrate them. Don't worry about it. And I'm just like, man, we really do not see this. I see it as dangerous. He doesn't see it as dangerous at all. He sees it as political pragmatism.
Well, I would say let's be pragmatically pragmatic here. And what I mean by that is that I don't lump all these people on that side in the same place. And I will lay out my biases here. As I say, like my parents are pretty left-wing. My father was very active in politics and at one point was an acquaintance of Jeremy Corbyn, who is the former leader of the Labour Party in the UK, and was on the left of the Labour Party, but he was a loyal member and he was kicked out. So I see that and I think, wait a minute, he was loyal until the last moment and you kick him out? And now it's created this division in the left in the UK, which the UK can't afford because we don't have proportional representation. So the vote is now split between three parties on the left, and we're looking at the far right, proper MAGA, not MAGA light, proper MAGA getting in the next election. And part of the reason, again, falls on the left, and I think the responsibility is on the left. And I think I've heard Destiny kind of not. He's said, "Oh, it's not really the responsibility of the Democrats that MAGA exist," and I'd push back on that. And this is what one of the points about the debate today is that I look back, and okay, it's in hindsight, so I'm going to be fair on them in regards to the Democrats in the US. It's like you've been way too soft on Republicans. You should have tried to find ways to put spanners in the works when they've been in power, and when you've been in power, you just steamroll through a little bit because they won't learn otherwise. And I'm seeing this across the board. And the other aspect of that is to do that, you also need to unify. And I think actually in America so far, you've had more of that pragmatism on the left than I've seen in the UK. But that's...
look who it is.
Wait a minute. Whoa.
Is that the man himself?
I was literally about to hang up.
Thought you could be talking shit on me and I wouldn't see you.
The funniest thing I could do right now is be like, all right, I got to go. Doop. But,
oh man, it's possible you could run.
Nah, I'm okay. What's up?
Oh no, I just heard you guys were chatting, so I'm here.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So actually, Stephen, why don't we summarize it for you a little bit? We had a debate about tit for tat, And I think what Reason kind of articulated was that within the tit for tat framework, it's not eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. You use legal, defensive tit for tat and proportional tit for tat. And then not just that, but also you cooperate, not reciprocate. You cooperate with the other side 5% of the time, 10% of the time.
Wait, let me clarify, because I feel like that's really super muddy. But you just mentioned like it needs to be proportional reciprocity. So if they don't cooperate, you don't cooperate back, and it's not like a little slap on the wrist if they've gone and given you a stab in the back. It's a very intelligent equivalent to the stab in the back. And you're giving, for example, how the judicial system is reciprocal, right? So if someone commits murder, they may even face capital punishment. But not in the same ruthless way, but in a more humane way, frankly. And so that's an example of tit for tat in action. And you agreed that actually is quite a good thing, right?
Yeah, I just didn't like Stevens' schizo. Let's convict all MAGA Republicans of insurrection, even if they didn't participate in January 6, 2021. I thought that was fucking crazy.
But are you opposed to it because it wouldn't be within the bounds of the law, or because it's not, you just don't agree with it? Because what if you could just pass a law that made it so that would be included in the 14th Amendment?
So as a specific example, Marco Rubio, to my knowledge, did not participate in January 6, 2021. Convicting him of aiding and abetting an insurrectionist in what I feel is a violation of the spirit of the law, I think that's fucking cringe and stupid and gay.
What if you changed it? What if you had enough to get a constitutional amendment on that, or just made a new law?
But that's
and be back to courts, and they would agree with
I'm talking about the underlying evidence. If a person doesn't, I don't care what laws you pass. If a person doesn't participate in a crime, they shouldn't be convicted of it.
If the crime was that is a crime, that participating in the Trump administration is a crime. What if that was the law that you passed?
That's cringe and gay.
But let's bring Destiny on this.
Are you excited or are you just hanging out? Because if you're just hanging out, I got shit to do.
No, but
cloud charging much here. This is my position. Okay, then it was a little confusing because we got into the law shit. But the 14th Amendment provides for a prior oath taker that if they had engaged in insurrection or given aid to somebody who had engaged in insurrection, that prior oath taker could not hold future office. I think that when the next elective body comes in, I think that they should pass a congressional statute acknowledging that, because the Supreme Court ruled that Section 3 of the 14th Amendment just doesn't apply anymore unless Congress does something because they wanted to save Trump on that. So they should apply a law that says, hey, we think that this was an insurrectionist administration. And then from there, they can decide whether or not they want to convene a congressional commission to find out who had engaged in insurrection, or they could leave it up to the states to adjudicate it in whatever way they feel necessary. This wouldn't be a criminal proceeding. It would just be like an adjudicated finding that would prohibit you from holding future office. You wouldn't be convicted of a crime or sent to jail. You would just be prevented from holding another office.
Yeah, but last night you were expanding that definition to even people who had just participated. Number one, admin officials who had participated in the second Trump administration. Number two, any Republican representative who was MAGA in general. So I guess my question is, would you be? Let's entertain it a little bit more than we were last night. Let's say that this was passable. Would you be okay with them limiting the scope to, number one, Trump? Number two, any of his admin who had actually committed crimes that furthered, insurrection. Number three, people who like Josh Hawley, who participated in January 6th.
I think I would broaden it as wide as possible, because this is what I want. This is what I would want to happen. This is what I would want to happen. Okay. And when Biden had a really bad debate against Donald Trump, there was pressure from all sides of the party who felt like they were all going to get fucked if Biden was allowed to continue running. So ex-party members came out. Obama was pressuring behind the scenes. Current party members, Pelosi and everybody were pressuring him behind the scenes, leaking stuff to the media. There was a lot of pressure because the whole Democratic Party felt like they were going to get fucked if Biden continued in that race. That pressure does not exist on the Republican side. It should be the case that every single member of a political party feels bought into making sure that their party is not trying to destroy the fucking country. And I think everybody should feel, ideally this comes from a place of honor and integrity, But absent that, it comes from a place of accountability, knowing that if your party's engaged in some shit like this and you know it, and you basically just keep your mouth shut or you openly support them, then I think that there should be accountability. And that accountability being you just can't run for future office. I don't even think that's that big of a penalty.
I mean, actually,
Okay.
Destiny, you could package that in with like the rhetoric of the Republicans. They're the anti-constitution party, right? The 14th Amendment, first, second, third. You can go through most of the amendments and find ways in which the MAGA are completely against the American Constitution. So they're trying to destroy the Constitution. They're trying to destroy America, and then you can use the 14th Amendment against them when in power because you are the party of the Constitution. So it's succinct for them.
But if you're trying to do things that are by the book, legal, without necessarily blowing everything up, like anti-constitution thing that might just be too broad of a thing. Like I think there should be a committee or a commission just specifically focused on the Trump administration, and then they can
Sure, but I mean rhetorically, in terms of like how you package the Democrat policies before the next election, and how you try and frame what the Republicans are. You're pro-constitution, they're anti-constitution, and that's also part of it when it comes to how you implement that with regards to the 14th Amendment.
Maybe I would just say the party of lawlessness. I understand the Constitution thing, but nobody understands the difference between like Constitution and law in the United States. And conservatives have fucked shit up because they when a conservative says, this was especially true in the January 6th thing, but it's true even now, when a conservative says constitutional, that's a dog whistle for break the law. So when a conservative says like, well, constitutionally we have this power, what they mean is we're going to ignore the Supreme Court, or we're going to ignore the judiciary, or not the judiciary, the legislature, because we have the power to do this from the Constitution. So constitutional has become a dog whistle for lawlessness. So I'd rather just say lawlessness. I understand your point though, but in America we have a hard time understanding how it works.
I'm probably gonna have to go in a minute, and I know that's gonna disappoint people who want the fireworks to fly. But we could do this later. Unless the schedules change, I think we're hanging out next Saturday. So my frustration that I think that Reason and I discussed in this conversation was when you were saying tit for tat. I imagined eye for an eye. I don't think you made the clarifications or caveats that Reason Riffs made. As a result,
it could be eye for an eye. I'm okay with eye for an eye. That's okay for me. I'm fine with that.
Okay, well then hold on. That's exactly what Reason. You see what the fuck I'm
No,
talking
no,
about?
no. But actually, Connor, he's saying exactly what you said. You said also sometimes eye for an eye might be tit for tat, and he's just said sometimes, right? So he's the same. You're both
that. Okay, so Stephen, as an example, you might not buy into the left-right binary, so entertain the hypothetical.
I can do that, yeah.
Let's just assume a lefty assassinated Charlie Kirk. By eye for an eye logic, shouldn't a right winger assassinate a left wing media pundit if we're going with eye for an eye moral logic?
What?
Well, I feel like we have a criminal system there to do the punishment, right? Like the guy who assassinated Charlie Kirk should probably be convicted and sentenced to whatever the capital punishment would be, right? Or life in prison.
But Charlie's dead, so that's not eye for an eye. That's not the same thing for the same thing.
I don't know if I would say that, like, so if you guys talked a lot about tit for tat, it sounds like you also went over, like, technically the best system is called, I think it's like a slightly forgiving tit for tat.
a generous tit for tat. I mean, there's an even better one,
like,
actually. But
it doesn't matter. Okay, it's
Yeah.
not relevant. But, like, if something like that happens, then, I mean, like, you'd let it slide once or twice. But at some point, yeah, you would have to start knocking off people on the other side. Because you can't sit there and all of your political figures are just fucking dying. And you're like, well, we got to adhere to norms. At some point, you'd be like, okay, well, fuck it. I guess we're doing this.
Okay, but
Steven's not as retarded as I want him to be.
In a video game, right?
Not as what?
You're not as okay. Last night you were kind of spurging out a little bit, and I thought your position was way too extreme. However, effectively all you did was you re-articulated Reason Riff's perspective that we did over the past hour, which is effectively like, how do I say this? I said so. He Reason asked, "What's an alternative to tit for tat?" And I said that it's not necessarily an effective way, but turning the other cheek in the Christian moral sense is an alternative. And he's like, okay, well, what happens if they ignore you turning the other cheek, where they're not shocked by their moral consciousness? Like, so for instance, January 6, 2021, and Trump not getting impeached. If they're not shocked by their moral consciousness, then what do you do at that point? And then we kind of arrived at generous tit for tat with the caveats that he articulated that you just re-articulated. However, sometimes when you're schizo and you're spurging out, it sounds like you just want revenge. It doesn't sound like you want generous tit for tat. You just want revenge.
Yeah, but the issue is we've been doing turn the other cheek for 2 or 3 decades. And then now when somebody's saying like, okay, well,
they're
time
not
for some
going to agree
punishment.
to that, and they're going to bring up a
What?
bunch of shit.
But
Just because they don't agree doesn't make it not
wait,
true.
Factually, there's a correct answer though. There is a truthful statement there. You can't just say
Sure.
when you do this thing of like, well, they're not going to agree about. Okay, well then fine, then fuck, let's just kill everybody. Let's all blow each other up because you're writing off every possible.
Don't jump so far ahead. So,
Sure.
So as an example, let's say we bring up January 6, 2021. Okay.
Okay.
And we say, hey, you guys threatened the existential core of the republic through a riot. And then you already know what they bring up, right? What do they bring up?
Yeah, BLM.
BLM. So the summer of love, billions of dollars in damage. January 6, 2021 was peaceful by comparison. He wasn't trying to overthrow the republic, blah, 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 blah. So in their mind, even if though they're stupid or delusional, they believe that they're engaging in tit for tat.
Sure, but then I would just ask them, who was the leader of BLM? Because Donald
that
Trump
one chick
led
for $3
Jan
million
6th.
and bought a house with
Yeah,
it.
no. So there was no BLM was a collection of riots across the country that happened during fucking COVID, and most of the Democratic leadership had to call that out. Biden and Kamala had to say no more riots, no more violence when they were running in their election. Trump has not done that.
What's the next talking? Well, actually, maybe I shouldn't just be a smartass. The next talking point
the Minnesota bail fund.
No, it's the the bail fund, and then also
the bail fund was a single tweet by Kamala, which had literally it's a bail fund.
The fiery but mostly peaceful protest. That's the one that I was thinking about.
That's a CNN reporter.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
it's not the same thing as the president of the United States, right?
I'm not saying these are equivalent. I'm saying that these people, number one, they have 80 IQ. Number two, you can't if you're resting on those arguments, then the only answer is blowing shit up. If the argument is going to be we can't agree on factual realities with each other, then you just have to start knocking people off until you have enough people to have a consensus on reality. That's it. No.
So your position is the maximalist, like loser, like we all give up and just start killing each other position. It can't be that we can't agree on simple basic facts.
No, reason actually has a solution that I think is better considered than what the fuck you just said, because you just said, oh, fuck it, let's go to civil war then, okay? What reason said is, as an example, there can be a legal proportional response to bad behavior. Fuck. Am I still here? Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Did he disappear? Did he disconnect? I'm sorry.
No, I dropped something and it knocked my screen off temporarily. So what reason was saying, and by the way, this goes up with the gerrymandering thing, by the way. Where effectively like right-wing states were arguing in order to gerrymander their own states. And then effectively Prop 50 came up. Prop 50 arguably is morally fucked up. Disenfranchising people via gerrymandering is fucked up, but it's proportional and it's legal and it sends across the right message. So you don't have to throw up your hands and say, okay, fuck it, civil war. You can come up with creative political solutions that actually punish the opposition that are still legal and defensive and reasonable.
Yeah, but isn't my
you don't like them.
Isn't my creative 14th Amendment solution of barring them from holding future office? Isn't that actually preferable to like what actual eye for an eye, tit for tat would be? Like imagine
I think the response to that would be they go to the gun.
Okay, then let's say that I say, okay, well then that shouldn't happen. It should just be that our next politician also says that we should start hanging Republican congressmen in the same way that Trump does.
Wait. I'm piling up a few issues here. I mean, because you kind of spoke on my behalf there a bit, kind of, and most of it you're right about. But I also have to delineate between. Wait, don't start. I also have to delineate between the rhetoric and the action, right? What Democrats should be saying, and this is, I'm just looking at the studies here. This isn't just my hunch. That they should be very, very careful about getting the Republicans into a position where they can self-victimize and be the real snowflakes and melt under the sun, right? You have to be very cautious about sounding vengeful in your rhetoric, but your action should be pretty harsh. And so, like, and as harsh as their action has been, right? And actually, what Destiny's point here about going after them legally using the 14th Amendment, I think it sounds brilliant. I think it's proportional and it's justice. It's justice being served, and it can be framed that way as well. So it can be framed in a very neutral and fair way. The other point I want to make is we've got to stop feeling responsible for what these nutcases are doing with facts and then distorting them into some kind of cruel fiction of a nasty fairy tale. What they're doing is using Soviet methods of misinformation. And what are the ingredients of misinformation? They always find a little seed of truth. So there could have been a protest with that penis protest. They could say that Destiny had on stream yesterday, and this woman being carted away. They could have, the MAGA heads could have just said, there's 1,000 people behind her. They will start with one seed of truth that there was this woman protesting, and then they'll make some crazy story out of it. And they're always going to do that. They're just being Soviet about it. We're not responsible for that. So yeah, they're
Okay.
always going to do it, whatever you do. So you don't act based upon how they think they're going to frame it, because they're always going to frame it that way.
Okay, but what I heard, which reinforces my criticism, is be soft in your rhetoric, be harsh in your penalties. Steven is harsh in his rhetoric and impractical in his penalties.
But he's not a
So
politician. He's a political pundit.
yeah, well, he's supposed to be one of the best debaters and best political thinkers in online politics. So raise the bar.
So
Well, it's not
What
reasonable.
part of his
I just have a
proposition
different-
is
I have a different-
impractical?
Wait, I have a different role. If I was a politician, my messaging is going to sound a lot different on things. I'm going to be a lot less combative with.
Well, that's
depending on
why
what
I said I was taking you seriously, but not literally, because I don't think your solutions are pragmatic. But I'm assuming that the emotion behind what you're saying is real and genuine,
Well, you can take me seriously, but
not literally.
and literally, you can take me literally, but taking me literally doesn't mean that I would say that every politician should copy verbatim, word for word, what I'm saying. That's not.
Sure.
Yeah.
Also,
I
what
just think
part of what he's proposing is unpragmatic? Like, it's possible to
Well,
use
yesterday
the
we were
14th
talking about
Amendment
like
to go after all
convicting a
those
bunch of people.
people.
Yeah, but
tax them in
yesterday it was
court.
more than the 14th Amendment. It was more than
You
the 14th
think
Amendment.
barring
but
25% of representatives in the American Republic via 14th Amendment, January 6th commission style legal proceeding is practical?
yeah, you can do it. You don't even have to go that far. It's possible to just impeach them. You can just have each body impeach their own and impeach all these people out.
Number
you don't
one,
wanna-
y'all
if
motherfuckers
they wouldn't
need
be
to
barred
worry about
forever,
winning
but-
the midterms first. How about y'all worry
Sure.
about that shit first?
Sure,
Like,
yeah, that's
like,
how
before
we're
we
saying right
start-
now.
that's
before
the-
we start
I-
planning
any
that
solution
bill
being
for
proposed is, like, after
quarter of the
midterms. That would be-
representatives
Yeah.
of the United States. How about
Yes.
you motherfuckers just focus on winning?
Yeah, we're focused on that. I think there's something to be said for, because this is where we're at right now. That's just driving me crazy. There's something to be said for, you go to dinner with a friend and his wife shows up and she has like bruises on her face. And it's like, wait, what the fuck? But she's like tried to hide them with makeup. As fucked as that situation sounds, that situation is better than you're at dinner and your friend just fucking smacks his fucking wife in the face right in front of you and then goes on like nothing is happening. Because in one scenario, at least there's shame involved, where the husband knows that like there's some fuck shit that he has to keep hidden. Like the Trump crypto scam should have been like an undercover journalist, through investigative journalism uncovers this after years of digging, but it's all just out in the open. And we're just so far beyond anything that when you say, well, it should be reciprocal, like I would argue that even the unhinged shit I've said is not even really getting close to the damage and the behavior that this administration has exhibited.
Or
just
unhinged
out
shit,
of
but they
curiosity, maybe you can answer this simply, and I do have to go soon. But what is the charge? So for instance, like I know that FARA violations are typically like charged for like foreign lobbyists who don't register.
What is the charge? Oh
that's
no,
about
for
what I
the
know.
for the
So
14th
what's
Amendment thing, you
what's the
don't for the
impeachment, or what's the charge?
for the 14th Amendment thing, you don't need a criminal charge. Somebody just has to have been found as having been engaged in insurrection. So for instance, when
Statutory judgment.
I'm asking
Right.
specifically about the corruption because it's something that I'm interested in. Obviously, I harped on the Hunter Biden thing a billion times. So what would we charge Trump with?
I'm not even thinking of charges for Trump. I would just bring back the J6 thing and I would bring back the Mar-a-Lago stuff.
Okay.
Is it? It's not the Hatch Act.
Also, you
Isn't there some law that says you can't use an office to
In order to
do
obtain
traffic to
gifts
an
and
office?
shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fuck yeah. Okay, cool.
Also, in theory, like with any other crypto scam, it could be like securities fraud or whatever, and you could do that. Whatever.
Well, but you would have to prove that he did some. I don't
Yeah,
think
sure,
just having a
but-
crypto coin is a securities fraud.
Okay. I hate to run, but I have a family engagement that I need to go to. But I do parasocially each and every one of you. Reason Riffs is technically more sane than Destiny and argues tit for tat better than Destiny. And I'm looking forward to yelling at you guys in the future.
And thanks so much for
Wait,
coming on my
one
show,
final thing.
Connor.
Hold on.
Really appreciate it.
One final thing. Wait, no, I'm just curious. One
Oh,
final thing you
boy.
need to understand, okay? Because I don't.
Dude, I
hopefully,
should've
reason impresses
disconnected
upon
right
you.
there. He's
What
like, wait, hold on.
What is the point? What is the point of a tit for tat system? Like ultimately, what does a good functioning tit for tat system look like?
Well, I don't even know if you would answer it this way, but I would answer it this way based off of my conversation with Reason Riffs. The hopefully the ideal outcome of a tit for tat is a eventual return to normalcy.
Yeah, you're saying in other words, yeah, basically the idea is there is no tits or tats because everybody's just cooperating because
Exactly,
they
yeah.
know that if they fuck around, that the other party's going to get it back. So when you say like an eye for an eye, like in my ideal society, it's an eye for an eye, and everybody's walking around with two eyes. Because why the fuck would you take some other dude's eye if he's going to take yours? You don't fuck around, And I'm repeating a meme I've heard this said. I don't know if it's actually true, but I'll repeat it because it's profound and it works here. An eye for an eye, theoretically, was supposed to be an upgrade at the time of how law and punishment was done back in the day, because it was like if you stole something, the person fucking murdered you and maybe your family. But like an eye for an eye, a hand from a thief or whatever, is like you've done a crime and now there's a proportional response. You've done a bad thing and here's the proportional response. It was supposed to be an upgrade from just where I'm killing you because you've wronged me, you know? So
Right.
yeah,
But
the goal of
I
a tit for
think-
tat is there is no tit for tat, and we all just cooperate. Ideally, that's why.
Yeah, well, the corporation is tit for tat. That's the point. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, okay, but then
don't
getting
defend.
into like an even higher morality, which once again, like earlier today, I was saying that I think that Republicans, similar to, and I think they take God's name in vain by clothing themselves in righteousness and religion while doing the opposite of what their religion prescribes. I also think they take the Republic in vain, where they clothe themselves in the Constitution and republicanism and the history of the Republican Party while doing the opposite of what that philosophy dictates. And so the point is, though, that like if we were able to return to normal, let's say that Trump disappears, we don't have a cult leader. As a result, we're able to move into a better political sphere. Then the ideal is going to be we can turn the other cheek because we expect that it was like accidental. You fucked up. You hurt me. Now I can turn the
Wait.
other cheek. Then we can get into tit for tat. Then we can get into eye for an eye. My problem is that like what seems to be, or at least what my understanding was that it seemed like you were advocating for eye for an eye instead of tit for tat. And anytime somebody brought up a complication with your specific tit for tat formula, instead of being like, yeah, you're right, actually that could fuck this up, I'm going to come up with a better proportional legal defensive solution, you were like, yeah, fuck it, let's kill each other, who gives a fuck? And that's like, that feels like eye for an eye and a rush to the bottom and a rush to anarchic violence.
Sure, I understand what you're saying there, and we just fundamentally disagree on this, I think, or whatever. But like the feeling that I'm trying to impress upon others from the lib left end, the feeling is just that like you have a person whose arms and legs have been chopped off, and now the person's like siphoning blood out of their body to take one of their kidneys, and then you're like, you know what? Fuck this guy. I'm gonna fucking chop his fucking hand off if he comes near me again. And you're like, excuse me, can we trim his fingernails first? You're gonna chop his fucking hand off? You're insane. Meanwhile, Trump is gearing up for another false indictment, another crypto scam, another murdering people in Venezuela. And it's like, holy shit, that's the issue that I have, is that people just don't seem to understand how.
But that's the thing, right? The argument is against how it's been done so far. And the idea behind tit for tat is proportional, right? Non-cooperation if they don't cooperate. So you have to do it proportionately. It might be in a different way, but it's got to be of the same magnitude. It can't just be trimming the nails when you need to cut the hands off.
Get past the analogies and the tit for tat.
I disagree. I'm not advocating for proportional. Everything I've advocated for, including my most extreme things, is less proportional. If I were to advocate for proportional, it would be civil war. We'd be going to war.
I mean, in very creative ways, right? But I mean, in terms of the effect on their party, on their success, it should be proportional. They should.
Hold on. This is where I think that if we had, I don't know, competent, intelligent legislators who were as competent and intelligent as Reason Riffs, then we would come up with creative solutions. So for instance, like we just passed the big, beautiful bill or whatever. Obviously government shutdown, all that kind of bullshit. But what would be negotiated is, especially once the Democrats have the majority in the House, effectively what you could do is you could fuck with the funding for Southcom, the military apparatus that is within South America. And you could say, until you have an AUMF, authorization for use of military force, until we get transparency through the intelligence reports of who the people that you've killed are, until we get cooperation from the military and intelligence agencies, we are withholding funding for Southcom. Like, we'll give you just enough in order to keep the soldiers alive and keep them operating, but you will not have money for Hellfires. You will not have money for drones. You will not have money for fuel until we get transparency from the executive branch about this thing. And I would view that as like a proportional, sane response to what's going on in South America. Whereas, once again, you're jumping to civil war.
It's good to hear that you're a
take away from Ukraine.
You're just to be clear, that's not proportional, and you seem to have a huge issue with this, like a court telling you to stop doing it. Somebody, I don't remember who it was, somebody brought up an extreme example yesterday, but they were absolutely right. You're saying, like, some guy gets caught raping a woman, and you're like, excuse me, sir, you're not going to be allowed to rejoin society until you pull your dick out of her. And then once he does, you're like, okay, let's go back. And it's like, excuse
Okay, well,
me?
the other option is things that aren't going to fucking happen. So that's kind of where for me.
What things aren't going to happen? Like
you can
worldwide
go,
terrorists?
you go to these like
Trump- okay,
extreme personal examples in order to
They're
get like the visceral
extreme.
emotional reaction, but we could
We're
just describe the
murdering-
things that we're describing.
We're just blowing up Venezuelans right now. We're just murdering it. And Trump is posting videos of it on Twitter, bragging about it.
If we had an AUMF, it would be legal, but we don't have an AUMF.
So it's war
that's
crimes and
that's the fight
murder.
that needs to be fought.
No, it's already illegal. We don't need rules against it. It's already illegal right now. It's already illegal. It's not okay. They can't do it right now.
Okay, then somebody needs to sue the Trump administration, because what's happening is Congress is supposed to be directing warfare with, like, as far as declared wars go, that's Congress's responsibility. As far as what we've done for the past 30 or 40 years, we've used AUMF.
Congress doesn't give a fuck.
We've given the president emergency powers and authority to act in cases of terrorism. So what he did is he declared them narco-terrorists, and then he started killing them. So that needs to be litigated in a court of law.
It is.
But I was debating Kafka last week about this, about if Dems get power, and hopefully they do in 2028, what should their priority be? If they had a choice, is it between really going after the system and improving the US system, or is it going after and using, say, the 14th Amendment and going after the heads of these criminals who are in power right now? And I was for the latter, and I think the reason it's for the latter is because it follows tit for tat, and it leaves a message and a deterrence of, you can't do this and be criminal and not be in prison, or not face, at least not being in office. And I don't even think not being in office is enough. There must be a way to find to prosecute these people when the Dems get power. It has to be on that level.
Included, these people can't hold office, won't hold office again, and are impeached and removed from office. So
I gotta run.
Yeah.
My parents mostly love you guys. I think you're pissing in the wind, but I think you're all excellent dudes anyways. So
thanks for coming on to my show, Connor. I really appreciate it.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Future. Wow. That guy, he ran, unbelievable.
No, Kafka wasn't against prosecuting people. He's just saying it wasn't the priority. But I actually think it should even be the priority, because otherwise it's just sending a message that you can get away with it, and they've been getting away with it for too long, and they've destroyed U.S. democracy, and it's really sad. It's really unconstitutional. It's really illiberal and against the freedoms that Americans have enjoyed. So it's just like the migrants that they're worried about coming over the border and changing and not accepting American culture. They don't accept American culture, right? In terms of the freedoms and the fundamentals. So they can't get away with it. They have to be prosecuted.
Yeah, Connor's issue is that he somehow thinks that those people not being able to hold office ever again isn't proportional or isn't accountability for the shit that they're doing right now. I have no idea why he thinks that. Because even if you did it legally, he's still like, no, you don't do that. No. It's just.
Well, he's worried about escalation, but actually, the most escalatory thing you can do is to appease. It just leaves a message. It is going back to this analogy I had earlier. I don't know if Destiny heard it, but it's just like you have a baby in the pram. It keeps throwing its toys out the pram. You don't keep putting the toy back in the pram. At some point, you leave it out of the pram, so the baby stops learning to throw the toy out the pram, right? And at the moment, the Republicans, they're throwing everything out of the pram, and people just keep putting it back in, or we'll put some of the
Trump
toys
is on
back
the
in.
Precipice of declaring like the Democratic Party like a domestic terrorist organization. Like,
he's literally saying to hang them. Like, literally, like, what are you gonna?
Okay, I'm watching this. Apparently, Mom Donnie's meeting Trump soon, so I love you guys. Be careful, okay?
Okay, take care. Yeah.
See ya.
No, but that's the thing. I mean, that's why I don't want to disavow violence in every case, because sadly, I see what's happening in the US, and not just the US, and I live in Germany now, and this was a country where it was left to fester for too long. And frankly, if the violent response to the violence that had already happened in Germany had happened a little earlier, then it wouldn't have got so far. So probably 1938 was the point in which the Nazis should have met their equals, because they took part of the Czechoslovakia, and they were allowed to do that. It'd be a bit like not pushing back against Russia right now and supporting Ukraine. That's effectively what happened in 38. And so at some point,
or maybe letting them, just saying now, hey, the war can end, but they can keep what they've already taken. That's more what it would be like.
And always just being in practice accepting of it. And so I mean it's the same things with the Republicans right now. that you can't just accept what they've done. They need to face incrimination. But at the same time, it could come to a point in which they start to exercise violence if they basically ban opposition parties in the US. I mean, what do you expect?
I think hopefully not, but
Yeah, but then it's just mirroring Russia, right? And what Russia is today.
Yeah.
And today, do we hope that Russians aren't potentially violent against their their leadership? Of course, I secretly wish that, because it's the only option left on the table. So I mean, in the end, that could happen in the US. So I mean, that's where I'd say violence could possibly start in terms of it being, the right thing in terms of some kind of coup against a dictatorship.
We can only advocate for what we think should happen.
Okay.
Advocate for accountability. Argue about what accountability is, what it isn't, what it should and shouldn't be. And I think we did that today. So there's that.
Yeah.
At least.
No, I really appreciate it, and it was a lot of fun. And at least Destiny got to defend himself a bit as well at the end, because there's only so much we could say, right? I mean, in terms of what he's meaning and what he's intending. So I think it's speculation. We can speculate a bit too much if we're not careful. And
oh shit, GT0 is here. I have to leave him, but you can. Yeah, what do you got?
How did the debate go with Counter?
You're watching?
Was it? I was fixing a washing machine. Yeah.
That's a good excuse. I like that excuse. It's good that if you're doing some handy work.
No, but you could have listened while you were doing it, but it was fine. He came around on some things, didn't end up really coming around on the actual meat of the matter from last night, but
I will probably watch it later because I was invested in our argument last time we spoke about this, and it's good to hear more sides.
Yeah.
Do you plan on doing more debates like this?
Me or Reason?
Yeah, on your channel or Reason as well.
Yeah, we're doing it's ECourt. We're gonna do, unless you mean like specifically on this topic. I mean, sure, if people want to have that conversation. Yeah.
Okay.
But we do ECourt. The plan for ECourt was bi-weekly or whatever, but this one scheduling was just totally shit. For a million reasons, but yeah.
I mean,
what happened last time? Why didn't he show up?
He just got the week wrong, I think. So
he thought it was this week instead of last week, but it worked out.
Okay.
No, but you asked me about debates. I mean, I would love to debate more people, and frankly, as disgusting as it might be, I really would like to debate people who are really on the other side, shall we say, who are leaning towards the right, that are maybe a bit more xenophobic, this kind of direction, because frankly, I think a lot of points I agree with on Connor, and I said it to him, but he's basically, in my eyes at least, a Democrat and Republican's clothing.
So I'm a diet liberal.
So our difference is, well, I mean, he's pragmatic, so I can accept him in that regards. But it is, there are people that you have really strong disagreements with. Sometimes on X, I write something and I actually get a reasonable response from people on the far right, and I would call them far right. But they're trying to engage with me. They're not swearing at me, and I would love to debate somebody. Well, I don't know about loving it, but I feel I should debate somebody like this, because that's where the real difference might be able to be made.
I gotta get my Discord more populated. Maybe those people can show up.
But
they can hop on.
The only person I know that is a little bit intelligent from the other side is Rob Noer, but he's a big web of facts guy, and he tries to steer you down those web of facts. I don't know if you're interested.
Yeah, he's also just very weaselly and.
Yeah, but we have to just put up. We have to confront their arguments, and if they're going to do it respectfully, even if it's not in good faith, we have to meet them at the table, right? Otherwise, we look weak as well. And these arguments can be confronted. But just to plug my own channel, I'm trying to get some content there. I'm having people on for interesting debates and discussions. So I had another writer on from the Pragmatic Papers, and we were discussing whether China could be considered a fascist state, and the issue also of our relationship with China in Europe, and I guess the American relationship with China too. And in a week or two, we're going to debate and discuss populist psychology and how we can combat that. So that's kind of the other side of this discussion, right? There's the strategy in terms of what our actions actually do to the other side, whether they support them or whether they're non-cooperative. But the rhetoric is something quite different, and we have to be very careful about legitimizing their argument that they're victims and that everyone's out to get them. So hopefully I'll have a discussion. She's a psychologist herself, so it should be quite a knowledgeable discussion. And then if anyone wants to debate me, I'm more than happy to debate on a whole host of topics.
Yeah, if I ever find a disagreement, I'll debate you on stuff.
That would be great. Yeah.
Debate.
Just
real quick.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, go for it. Go for it.
No, I was just going to make a silly joke that well, I disagree with you on that, so we can.
Guys, everyone follow Reason Riffs on YouTube. I posted it in DGG as well.
Also, Connor Counterpoints on his stuff. He didn't plug his stuff usually, because you just say VALOR, media common spelling, network common spelling, Counterpoints, 40K, whatever the fuck. Yeah.
He's a super cool guy. Yeah, he's a really, really nice guy.
Yeah, he's chill. Like that guy.
I just wonder, like, the debate thing is really getting boring, I think, because it's only like lefties sometimes, but even like the lefties are the boring people, like Prime Kais. Who else is left? Like, everyone retreated from debating. I don't know.
Yeah, because they can't actually defend their ideas, it turns out. And they don't have an interest in it, or they know they can't, so they have to. I
mean, if the left debates itself too much, it also becomes counterproductive because it just sounds like infighting. So it's also about being a bit careful about how it shouldn't really be a debate, but more of a slightly heated discussion. On the other hand, I think maybe it's a bit of a shame today that Connor didn't realize he actually agreed with tit-for-tat, and it was more about the implementation that there was some level of disagreement about, because that is still an interesting discussion. And also, Connor wants to talk about immigration, and I think, I mentioned this last week. So
I wasn't like piping in that much, but his immigration stuff, like just what he said about whatever.
No, but I don't entirely disagree. I think even there we can come to a point of agreement. But just to go over these 3 points last week I made about learning from the UK Labour Party. They didn't prep for being in power properly. That's really, really clear. They're pandering to the far right too much, and that needs to be dealt with. And they also made stupid election promises when they didn't need to. And so this might also be true in Bulgaria. I don't know, Dr. Tor, but I think a lot of countries should realize when they're trying to combat populism that to learn from the mistakes of the Labour Party. And I hope the Dems do that, because it's no good saying, you need to get power first and then we can sort it out. No, you need to prep for being in power. And so I think it is good if Dems are talking about that stuff.
Oh,
yeah. Also, real quick, somebody in chat said, I just realized Harris conceding the election is an example of defection in tit-for-tat. I was at Reason Stream last night because I was at Kamala Harris's book tour event here in Miami. No, I don't think conceding the election is defection. I think that would be cooperation, or I don't even think it would go into tit-for-tat at all. I don't think that would be an example of anything in tit-for-tat. It would just be, that's what happens when you lose an election, you concede. But I don't know if you have anything else on that. But
when you're applying it, it's a little bit more difficult, right? So in a sense, it was in isolation, it could be considered defection, but or actually cooperation. So, and I think that's what they meant. That's what they meant to. Yeah, that's what they meant to actually say. They're cooperating with the Republicans, right? And to defect would have been to maybe deny the election, but without
they did it before, yeah.
But without any evidence of and the basis for that, which at the time, I mean, there's apparently evidence that's come out since that there may be issues with the election results, but I think that would set a poor precedent. So it's not just about defecting; it's how you defect. So you have to pick and choose where you defect. But I think conceding the election was actually an important cooperative step that you just can't avoid it, and so there wasn't really the choice there.
Not every defection is equal. Not every defection is warranted / justified.
It has other effects, so you have to think about the broader effects. It's not just the theoretical game theory being applied. There's a bit more detail to it, and clearly that wouldn't have a very good effect. It's an interesting point.
I wonder, like you mentioned applying like the labor experience to other countries, and it just makes me laugh because here the politics is so retarded. Like there is no ideology here. It's like absolute populism because, or some kind of not even the populism in the sense in the West, because every party is has like this amorphous platform that can be left or right depending on like what the situation is. So you don't have like principled policies, and you have like people belong to their parties, or they like a leader, and that's how people get elected here, which is kind of sad. And I don't know how to get out of this system.
It
like,
depends on the system that you have, right? I mean, if you have proportional representation, you can just start a small party. If you don't have proportional representation, you have to frankly infiltrate one of the parties that already exists and work from inside it.
It is proportional, but usually like even if you get into like with a small number of people a party, how are you supposed to, like, if you're the only one with ideology and everyone is like a populist, how are you changing the system?
Well, I'd push back on this idea that you should become quite or very ideological. I think it's also part of the problem when people stick to their ideologies. But being pragmatic can be for different reasons. You can be pragmatic because it gets votes, or you can be pragmatic because it seems to have the best effect. So I think as a political party, you need to, pragmatism is a really key and important ingredient that shows you to be a dynamic and thinking party, rather than just sticking staunchly to, being super pro-capitalist or pro-socialist or whatever you want to be, including in policies. But you really need to also be talking to the people that are suffering in a country. And I mean, Bulgaria's still got immense poverty, for example. And at the same time, you need to say that confronting poverty also helps the middle class. So you need to draw the line, or draw the causal chain between both of those things. And avoid, if you're on the left of politics, and I guess when you're saying ideological, it's principled in the sense of caring about humanity. I think you have to be a bit careful about not talking about the economics a little bit more in simple terms, because talking about it's not fair, it's not good, it's about rights of peoples. I mean, frankly, we construct rights anyway. And secondly, a lot of people actually just don't care about that stuff. They care about their economic well-being. And so you have to show how you...
in the practical terms.
Yeah,
but like it's hard to I think find like a line to go down, because the parties, you have like the ruling party, which is supposed to be like center right, but in many ways many of their policies are center left, like a lot of their social policies. And we have the Socialist Party, which is the former Communist Party, which is very conservative in its social policy, and even in some aspects, even in economic policy when it comes to certain subjects. So it's like if you try to say, oh, we are going to make the DGG center liberal party, okay, but
Based.
but then you're trying to like run on. Can you run on policy when everyone is running on populism, or on like charisma?
Well, you have to prioritize your policies, right? I mean, Destiny's brought this up before about picking a few good policies and a good areas of policy to really focus on, and not trying to be too broad in how you're trying to change things, and just making it clear, and trying. You do need to convince people. You shouldn't just be reactive to the polling, because you want to change things, right? Otherwise, it's just a status quo. But at the same time, then you need to convince people, but in fairly simple language and in a language that they understand. And that's what I mean about the economic side of things. Good selflessness is going to be selfish in some way, right? Like I want crime to be lower, so I feel safer outside, right? It's not just because there's some people that have had a bad hand in life, and I want them to be helped by social welfare system. It's selfish on my part in many respects, that I want other people to have a better life. And you have to shape it in that way a little bit, your policy, so that so everyone feels, oh, it's going to help me. Okay, the kids go to school. I don't have kids, but those kids in the future have a better life. Will maybe able to care for me, won't be criminals. So you always kind of have to draw how a policy that affects somebody else positively affects you too, and then put it in really, really simple terms. Pick a few policies and focus on that. And then you may fail. I mean, so of course, there's no guaranteed chance of success either.
But I'll say to that, do you think, like putting it more like in actual terms, do you think, in your opinion, like Kamala Harris last election was able to do that, or do you think she failed at that?
How can you blame Kamala Harris when she had,
Well,
barely any time?
Well,
So
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I was positively surprised by her campaign. Certainly the beginning part of it. I think later on, too many people were whispering to her. She didn't trust in her own ability, her own rhetorical ability. I thought she was pretty good at the beginning, and I think that affected it. But the overall thing that affected it was she just didn't have enough time. Who the hell knows?
I think you took the words out of my mouth. That's kind of what I was getting at. Was you're saying like about like you need to choose a few policies, put it in the right words, and did that. And I think that's absolutely what Kamala did and was able to do. But like for a million other reasons, I think for me the biggest one was just the time that wasn't able to work. Which is another thing is that there's like so many factors that go into fucking politics, even like discounting an election, like just politics in general, that it's like even if you have the right messaging, it might not work out. And it's
so many levers here.
I think Trump was much more clear. Like his things are clear. They're dumb, but they're clear. Like build the wall or deport all immigrants, stuff like that. And I think
like
Democrats,
like he's asked, "What is your healthcare plan?" He says he doesn't have one, like concept of plan.
Yeah,
like,
but
he doesn't run on policy. It's just slogans. And like you're right, it's like, clear, but
whenever he gets like a question he doesn't have an answer to, he steers back into like the easy, simple slogans. And Kamala was more like talkative, more like intellectualizing, and I don't have a problem like listening to Kamala and like her opine and give like a more complicated way of answering. But I think a lot of people just want the simple stuff, and when she starts talking about the soul of the nation, of democracy, of things like that, they just glaze over.
So I'm with you, but like people only excuse that from Trump because he's Trump. If Kamala had done the same,
she's a black woman,
you're proposing, which is not even exactly what you're proposing, but if she had, dumbed it down / set things shorter or not intellectualized, then people would have just called her stupid and a black woman. And that's it.
Or she's talking down at you or something like that.
There's actually a lot of interesting points there because one of her strengths is that she's a very bright woman. And I mean, of course, they were trying to frame her as being stupid with the coconut tree thing, where actually the point she was making was pretty good. But on the other hand, there is a big warning that I think Dr. just kind of... Well, what do you prefer to be called, Dr. To or To? Or,
is fine.
Dr. T, okay. It's a really, really interesting, important point here. We should be very, very careful about listening to a leader who we think might be successful with the policies that we want and say, oh, they sound really good, therefore they're a good leader. Like what we hear as a good leader or with a good messaging, not to sound arrogant, but I mean, maybe we're special cases, right? If we're ones really analyzing politics, most people aren't doing this. And it is, at the end of it, about getting the most votes. So you do need to know how to communicate, or that the leader that we want to succeed does need to know how to communicate. That's why Tim Walz was a good choice, because I get the impression he communicated to a big, broad number of people. Bright people will take him on, but he also seemed very amicable, and he was a sports teacher, right, in the past. So that's something that we can all
coach. Walls is what they called him, right?
Yeah, he was kind of an ideal VP pick, actually. And for that reason, right, because it's not just about us selfishly going, oh, I like listening to that. A bit like with Obama, which is why it's amazing that he was ever elected. Because, as I say, like some of his prose, it was basically prose what he was saying at points, right? And really eloquent. The
Harvard Law Review will get you, yeah.
But he was incredibly gifted with language, but in a way that's a little bit hoity-toity. I don't think Harris was to that level, frankly, and maybe that was a good thing. So I don't think Harris was too intellectualizing. I thought she got the tone quite good, but in the end, you have to look at how other people reacted to her.
I agree. Even just like, even and like I see what DRT's saying, but like I don't think she really like went that far into that, into like intellectualizing the way other politicians have or
exactly,
do. Like even just last night, like I could tell it was like not dumbed down, but like she's not going into like legal specifics or anything. It's just, she's telling it kind of how it is. Not using big words, not using
I mean, when you talk about the soul of the country,
I think she did so like even like in the debate or in her speeches too. I don't think she did it. It's just like anyone will look like they're doing that next to Trump. I don't know.
Yeah, and that's also a good point. And so you have to be a bit careful because you don't want to. I don't think you need to reflect the Trump in all the ways possible to say, he's been so successful, so just mimic him, but on the left. I do think, frankly, that there are some things you have to think, how is that working? Why is that working? What are you tapping into? It doesn't mean you just blindly copy them, but I do think language is one of those things. You are going to need to be fairly simple with your language, and he does pick only a few policies and he ignores the other ones. And I actually think that is an aspect that Dems possibly could learn from, but be really, really strong in those policies. But he also has it easier, don't forget, because he doesn't actually need to be coherent. Even in power, people will still like him, whereas Dems want to actually be coherent, so it's going to be a bit more difficult and you're going to be disadvantaged.
I think
and as much as I'm not like, racism, sexism, whatever, like one of Trump's like biggest boons is that one of his simple like things that he chooses to focus on is just hate. So like he kind of can get away with everything else because as long as hateful people can get on board with the hate, they can overlook whatever the fuck else. Or don't even have to, not even overlook, just like they're on board with that, and so they'll accept everything else.
Yeah, where they get filled with hate and they don't think for themselves, and it becomes like supporting a sports game, right? So
I think Mamdani is like really good at staying on message and like talking about policies and not like more general things. He usually like gets recenters every time the conversation, even if it's like a more theoretical question. He like they ask him about communism or socialism, and then he goes, "Oh, we're doing like a rent freeze, or we're doing free buses, or we're doing government stores, or something like that." And you can disagree with. I disagree with some of those, but like it's concrete, so people know what to expect.
Yeah, I mean, that was a point of disagreement between Connor and I, actually. We didn't really pick up on that. And maybe it's a basis for a debate later on when he's had power for a few months, because Connor seemed a bit afraid of Mandani. Whereas Destiny, for example, said, yeah, exactly. And and also I was quite impressed that Mandani actually condemned Hassan. Because I don't know if you know this, but maybe I mentioned it last week. The new leader of the Green Party in the UK, he's very left wing, which in itself, as I say, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. But he brought Hassan on his podcast because he has a podcast as well. He's an incredibly gifted communicator, and so it's like, okay, now I'm going to delineate here between Mandani and Polinsky, the head of the Green Party, because one's condemning Hassan, the other one isn't. And I see these things, and I think they're actually quite important signifiers. It's also about reading the temperature of the room and being quite clever about who you ally with. I think that is an important factor, but it's not everyone on the quite far left or very far left, however you want to call it. I don't think they're all bad. It is in the end about whether they can, at the end of it, compromise and get round one candidate. Which Hassan can't do, right? So I mean, he's clearly, a bad apple in that bunch. But just the policies themselves, or wanting, socialized healthcare and this kind of thing. There's a debate and discussion, and if you really believe in your points, you'll debate and discuss that. And I think it's a reasonable position to have. I mean, Sanders is basically that, right? And
I can accept socialists. It's the authoritarianism.
Well, yeah, exactly. I couldn't have said it better.
That's where I draw the line.
Yeah, exactly. And socialists are authoritarian, but not all of them.
Keep in mind that he didn't completely disavow Hassan. He said I think he disavowed the comments, and I think they are. I think he will be open collabing with Hassan in the future, but like, yeah,
It's possible.
think-
Yeah, but he didn't even use his name.
I doubt
It's
it.
true. Well, no, there is a fair point. Like when he condemned him by describing who he was, and he didn't actually use his name.
he also said like the comments. I condemned those comments, and he said
Yeah,
like
it was
I
specifically like
want,
the 9/11 thing, right?
yeah, he wants. He said that people should, or the politicians should engage with all kinds of different views and stuff like that. But he condemns like the 9/11 thing.
He also then on a second occasion, I think it was, where he condemned him because of the fact that Hassan had been repeatedly electrocuting his dog. So I'm pretty sure he brought that up as well.
I think he literally did, yeah.
Yeah, because that showed that
haven't
he was
seen
aware of what's going on, which was quite interesting.
Oh shit!
Maybe.
And so I think he was dropping a hint like, don't bother trying to. I'm not going to like call you out by name, because that would have been worse for Hassan, right? So I think that's why he didn't do that. But I doubt he will work with him again. I think
he might be toxic, yeah.
Yeah, and frankly, he is, right. And he doesn't. I think Hassan's made out to be a bigger thing than he is. Even Hassan's realizing it. He's basically an island, and he's really cut himself off by a lot of his actions.
Like he's big online and like Twitch or whatever, but like in actual like real politics, like the second he tried to get into like, I'll support this candidate, that guy's like, I don't support this guy, I don't agree with what he said, and we're like, yeah. So
yeah, I mean,
Reason, can I ask you?
he's not gonna try it again. Like if there's another Mondani, he's not gonna try it again because he knows it's gonna go the same way. Because he's a fucking coward, but yeah.
I think he might try with Plattner, or did he disavow Plattner after the Nazi thing, or like
Did who disavow? Hassan?
Hassan, yeah.
I doubt it.
I think Hassan.
All the lefties were like fucking. Oh, who cares? He's still whatever.
Yeah, but like they were clowning on him because I think Bad Empanada, that side of the internet was very anti Plattner.
So who's Plattner? So I mean, I don't have my.
He's running for Senate in, I believe.
Oh, that guy with the tattoos who had the tattoos.
Yeah, with the Nazi tattoo. Yeah.
Oh, he's a bit.
In Maine. He's running he's running for Democratic primary in the Senate election for next year, trying to unseat Susan Collins.
He's a bit toxic, right?
Yeah, the tankies don't support him, but the libertarian socialists, like the Vosh types, the Emma Vigeland,
they love him.
Really?
Those types love him, yeah, and like defend him after that. So Hassan, I can see going either way with him. So I wouldn't be surprised if he shows up in an interview with him or something.
And what do you think about
this guy's like a fuck Chuck Schumer, fuck the Democrats guy, and he's running for the Democratic Party. Like,
oh well, until recently, I was also a bit of a fuck Chuck Schumer, but I mean, I think he did pretty well with the shutdown. So he's got some.
Yeah, but like he's not fuck Chuck Schumer, like he's just fuck Democrats.
Yeah. So you're both kind of anti this guy. I saw like an hour-long interview with him, but I forgot his name. But
I mean, still like obviously vote him over the Republican, but yeah.
It's still on the primary, so they have like a more moderate option.
Yeah, but
also I think he's
reason
very charismatic. I think even in like the interview where he revealed like the Nazi tattoo. He was very like well spoken, even though it's like a retarded thing that he was talking.
Oh yeah, he was good at speaking. But still, I mean, there's so many like
that's
bad
like
signs.
Really
yeah,
but another reason that they love this guy is because the guy that he's running against in the Democratic primary is like just an old like Democrat, whatever. So
it's an easy race.
Like, oh, fuck the old people, whatever.
It's easy. It's super easy.
Martyrdom.
But this goes back to that point I was making, that just because I don't really like the way maybe I actually didn't mind it, I found him quite reasonably charismatic to me. But if I didn't, it wouldn't really matter, right? For one, I'm not American, but also, it's not the big percentage of the potential voters for him. That's what matters in the end. And I think he might appeal. It's a bit like choosing the candidates. Why I look at Newsom and I think, a middle-aged male actually may be a bit more effective than a female candidate. Because that's the other question: is it America ready for a female president? I think that's hard.
That's why I'm like, I'm very curious to see how the Democratic primary goes in a couple years or whatever, because obviously I'm loving Newsom, what he's doing, everything else, but well, I say this now, like the two like biggest candidates that it seems are like, you know, they're probably gonna run and whatever. Is like Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom, as I see it. There are the people put in like Shapiro, Josh Shapiro, governor in Pennsylvania. People just maybe like whatever else. But if it's like between Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom right now, I'm just not sure. It would depend on what happens in the primary, what positions they stake out against each other, because they are like also not like those two, like the way that like Kamala in 2020, she, you know, became Biden's VP after she had like said really harsh things about him. I don't think she would do the same in this case. Like particularly in her book, she wrote that the first day that she was like doing her campaign before it was even announced, had been like calling like big people in the Democratic Party for like endorsements, and Gavin Newsom literally just never responded to the thing.
Oh, okay, interesting.
I
which
think
is
she
yeah,
needs to
they're very much
change.
not.
I think she needs to change a lot if she wants to have another chance. Like,
I disagree.
I don't think people like a loser, and Trump lost, but he is like a very special case. I think. I don't think she can.
I
do the
disagree.
Trump.
Just because she lost, she shouldn't run. Just because she didn't lose by much.
No,
It was a
she
pretty close
should.
election.
She should, and she can and she should maybe,
yeah.
but the way she runs must be very different from the
Yeah.
first campaign. Like not just in like policies, but
Yeah.
like in demeanor, in like
I agree, and
engagement.
I think it would be like the biggest thing with the last one is that they had to play it very safe because there was no time, so risks are a lot more, you know, a lot riskier.
Yeah, but in the first days when no, but like at the very first, she was talking off the cuff, right? She seemed quite natural in the way she was talking, which wasn't too stilted. And I think that part of the campaign, whatever you fight Trump with, is got to appear, and frankly should be as genuine as possible, right? If you make a few slip ups in what you say, but it's because you're just talking naturally from the heart, and you haven't got this checklist of, you know, of the demographics in which you need to try and appeal to, and by saying certain key words, whatever it might be. I mean, I think there's a little bit of that, but frankly, there's got to be something genuine about the next candidate. And Harris at the very beginning was very good at that. But nevertheless, she will need to change it in some critical ways. But it needs to still come from the heart.
I got that feeling last night at her event. Very genuine. And I mean, I've always kind of felt it like in the way she talks, unless it's literally like a prepared speech. She comes across very genuine. She's very smart. Like if she runs again, and I think that I'm like 99% sure she will, it will be very, very differently from the last one, closer to like what you're saying, like at the start of the last campaign. Because I think one of the things, kind of from reading the book and just in general, like it, at the start of her campaign was very different from the end. By the time of the end, they were being very safe because it was looking closer and closer. Like it was like it was getting closer and closer. So anything besides, you know, the perfect constructed whatever is like not.
Yeah, exactly. So, it was no test, but that also doesn't mean to say that it was also a sign that, you know, everything's great with her as a candidate. And we've got to be a bit careful, just because we like her as a human being and her politics. You know, it just might not work, and that's why, I mean, my politics would be closer to Harris, but I still think, you know, if I had to put money on it, I would go for Newsom, to be frank. And it's because he's a male, right? And that's one thing.
Man, like I could see it for sure. You know, that's why, like even like when I'm thinking of that, and like, you know, we're talking about this, like obviously we'll vote for whichever Democrat wins, whatever the fuck. But like, I'm very curious in the primary what it will be. Like, because obviously Kamala Harris has moderated a lot since 2020 when she was running the primary. She was running a lot further to the left than she is now. And I from reading the book and from everything she said and from in general, I do think like the moderation is genuine. So I don't know if she will I don't know if she's just gonna go back to being as left as she was in the 2020. But I wonder where it'll end up being, like where Newsom versus Harris will be on like the left-right spectrum, because Newsom has like every incentive to moderate, and so does she. So I wonder where it'll be.
I want the rhetoric right in the middle, but I want the policies to be pragmatic, and some of those policies will be, especially by American standards, quite far left. But you've got to frame them in a centrist language. So it's a bit like the strategy of how you deal with the other party. The actions don't match the rhetoric. the actions can be very non-cooperative with the Republicans, but the rhetoric shouldn't be vindictive and aggressive.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing as how you deal with your policies and you communicate with the electorate. Your policies should be framed in the language of the center. But some of those policies should be liked by the center, but they aren't because of culture and just habits and what people associate with it. And so then you need to implement those policies, but give it a different language. And America is dying and desperate. I mean, look, you've got Connor, who's a Republican, saying America needs some frankly socialist policies. We've got that far, right? Yeah, that's how serious it is.
Yeah.
A Republican is talking about some socialist policies. And to be frank, there are socialists in the past that would have listened to Connor without him saying who he is. You go, oh, he's a socialist then. You really, we are at that point because it's gone so far to the right. And that's what drives me crazy. All these people on the right of politics, and it's happening in Britain, and they say, "Oh, the BBC is a communist infestation in the UK." The BBC is pretty, it's centre right. It's leaning to the right. It's moved further and further right.
Yeah.
Right. The BBC, when they had Jeremy Corbyn, or had a news article about Jeremy Corbyn, they put on using Photoshop some communist hat on this communist worker's hat. On his picture, and had a big picture up in the background. Look, I'm no lover of Corbyn. As a human being, he's great, but not necessarily his politics. But that was propaganda against Corbyn. They didn't do that for the right, and they have Farage on almost every day. So, they always say how far right everything is going, and they say that to preempt the fact that we could point out, far left. It's because it's gone far right, and so this again is another Soviet technique. I don't know if they're doing it by accident or if they're being, people on the right are being taught this, but you preempt criticisms you're going to get, and then you say the opposite, and you say the other direction.
News. We have Mamdani and Trump talking.
Oh boy, breaking news. All right,
cool.
With that, I think I'm gonna go offline. I'm hungry. I'm gonna go eat.
Yeah.
For the reason, can I ask you one thing after that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thanks
I'll end real quick. Thanks for coming on, DRT. Thanks Reason Riffs so much for coming on, having our debate. Sorry it took so long for scheduling and whatever, because
thanks for your patience. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
No, I mean, I was a factor for a couple weeks in that it didn't happen. So I mean, but I'm glad it happened. I think it was pretty good. I really appreciate having you on.
We can go in another room if you want to.
Yeah, I also need to eat.
Thanks everybody for watching.
I also need to go for this soon.
See you guys next stream.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take care, Zip. Yeah. And I'm gonna actually also end my stream as well, because I had work and then I came straight home to prepare for the debate, and now I need to have something to eat as well. But maybe we can come on my stream at some point, and we can I also would be kind of a bit interested in Bulgaria, and also as part of the EU, and also just to hear about the country. So
I was going to ask about your thoughts on getting how do you say it, electoral activity, like how many people vote, because we have a problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we can leave it for another time.
Well, I'll just give one part of the answer. Sometimes, of course, it's good to get people to vote, but they can also vote the wrong way, and it can create a swell towards the wrong and towards some really extreme parties. So
yeah, of course.
A lot of
you can see though a chart I posted in general. It's like a really sad chart from 91 to.
Yeah, I saw that. I didn't know what it was about, but yeah, it doesn't look good.
So it can go both ways. So I don't think.
I mean, US is going to be worse than this.
No, so, I think US people are very engaged with politics. Like you will always have like at least 50% maybe voting in US.
Maybe, but depending on the election, yeah. But
yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna head out, y'all. Thanks.
Yeah.
But
that's a good conversation starter for next time. DRT.
Sure.
So, as I say, it'd be interesting to hear more about Bulgaria and Bulgarian politics, because it's relevant to European politics, and there are many member states that get forgotten in the EU, but they're all critical, and frankly and sadly, Bulgaria is kind of sensitive to Russian interference.
Very much.
Yeah, and that is a bit like a cancer that can grow through the European Union. We've seen it in Hungary, we've seen it in the Czech Republic, now in Slovakia. So that needs to be spoken about a little bit more. So that could be something that I'd imagine you're pretty knowledgeable on, and it would be great to get you on my channel, and we could discuss and debate, how we can prevent that and reduce that from
Sure.
destroying our
Sounds good.
politics. So
Thanks for talking. Have a nice dinner.
no, I really appreciate you coming on. Yeah, and yeah, thank you. Likewise, yeah. Peace. Oh, that was a fun stream. Yeah, so there's a few people hopefully will get on my channel in the next few weeks if you've been listening this far, and yeah, try and share the channel. The more people that I see following the channel or watching the streams, the more worthwhile it is for me as well. But I must say I also enjoy the people I've been chatting with, and I also think this is really important to be politically active in this day and age, and that's not just about voting. We need to talk to people. So if anyone cares about politics and wants to make a difference, and if anyone disagrees with me, I'm really open to debating and talking it through in a reasonable and considerate way. I mean, you could be a reform voter from the UK, MAGA supporter in the US. I'm very frustrated by that politics, but if you want to talk to me reasonably, I'll talk to you reasonably, and we could have a really constructive debate. So yeah, thank you if you've watched this far, and like the stream, and yeah, sign up to my channel, and yeah, you can DM me Reason Riffs in Discord as well. And yeah, have a great weekend if you've been watching the stream.